Welcome to At Midnight, the late-night dive into history, myths, and legends. The Golden Age pirate lived less by a marked map than by wet rope, uncertain law, useful gossip, and a merchant willing not to ask tiresome questions. Behind the black flags were private commissions, mutinies, shipboard bargains, crowded courts, and a surprising amount of paperwork for people remembered as enemies of order. This is At Midnight. Let's step into the dark. The paperwork began with a flag, a commission, and a captured ship waiting outside a harbor. The vessel might carry sugar, hides, timber, wine, or cloth. Her crew might insist that she belonged to a friendly power. The armed captain who had taken her might produce a folded letter bearing a royal seal and say that, under the terms of the current war, everything had been done properly. Before anyone divided the cargo, a court was supposed to decide whether the prize was lawful. This was the respectable face of private violence at sea, respectable being a flexible word when a profitable hull was tied to the quay. A privateer was not simply a pirate with better manners. A privateer sailed under a wartime commission, usually called a letter of marque, issued by a recognized government. The ship remained privately owned and the venture privately financed. Its owners bought provisions, paid wages or arranged shares, armed the vessel, and accepted the risk that it might return empty or not return at all. In exchange, the commission permitted attacks on specified enemies. Captured property then entered the prize system, where papers, flags, cargo, routes, and testimony could be examined. The limits mattered. A commission issued during one war did not last forever. It did not normally authorize attacks on every ship that appeared slow enough to catch. A privateer who seized a neutral vessel, concealed a prize, ignored the permitted region, or continued after peace could find that the useful seal offered less protection than expected. The difference between service and robbery was therefore real, but it was not always obvious from the deck. It depended upon dates, identities, diplomatic recognition, legal argument, and the ability of a state to make its view prevail. The word pirate named a person acting without recognized sovereign authority, especially in robbery at sea. Yet, even that plain definition opened difficult questions. One ruler might recognize a commission that another ruler dismissed as worthless. A colonial governor might quietly welcome goods taken from a rival, while officials in London preferred not to know too much. A vessel might show false colors until the final approach. Its papers might describe an owner, voyage, or nationality that the captors challenged. Law at sea traveled inside envelopes, but authority still required ships, courts, witnesses, and officials willing to enforce it. The word buccaneer belonged to an earlier and more particular Caribbean world. It grew around hunters, coastal settlers, small boatmen, and raiders during the 17th century. Some hunted cattle and prepared smoked meat on Caribbean islands. Some joined expeditions against Spanish towns and shipping. Some carried commissions, sometimes of doubtful breadth. Others relied on toleration that lasted only while their attacks served an imperial purpose. Later storytellers used buccaneer as a handsome synonym for pirate, but the broad use hides the unsettled colonial conditions that produced it. England's seizure of Jamaica in 1655 helped create those conditions. Rival European empires claimed islands, ports, and sea routes that they could not govern evenly. Spanish settlements and shipping offered targets. Jamaica offered anchorage, buyers, and officials who could regard raiders as useful neighbors when policy allowed it. Indigenous pilots and suppliers, African laborers, transported servants, hunters, merchants, and local communities all belonged to this world, though the printed adventures often pushed most of them toward the edge of the page. Port Royal became associated with the profitable side of raiding. Captured goods did not divide themselves. They needed storehouses, taverns, brokers, buyers, and people prepared to convert questionable cargo into ordinary commerce. A successful expedition could enrich participants and send customs, fees, and spending through a port. The same expedition could become diplomatically embarrassing when treaties changed. Colonial tolerance was not a declaration of eternal pirate fellowship. It was an arrangement shaped by war, distance, revenue, and selective eyesight. Alexandre Olive Eix, Quemelin, left one of the foundational accounts of this buccaneer world. His Dutch book appeared in 1678 and crossed languages in altered forms. It is close enough to the period to preserve invaluable detail, but closeness is not neutrality. Exquemelin wrote from experience and grievance, and translators and publishers reshaped his material. Henry Morgan objected successfully to his portrayal in an English edition. That dispute is a useful warning. The early history of piracy arrived already filtered through national rivalry, personal complaint, and the needs of a printer. Morgan himself illustrates the trouble with labels. Remembered later as a pirate, he conducted major raids with official support and became part of Jamaica's governing order. His career did not prove that legal categories were meaningless. It showed that those categories could change with appointment, diplomacy, and the judgment of whichever government controlled the court. A raid applauded in one season could be inconvenient in another. A man condemned in Spanish writing could be rewarded in English administration. Empire did not dislike maritime violence in principle. It disliked violence it could not direct or profit from. The tighter period now called the Golden Age came later, roughly from the 1680s through the 1720s. The label itself was retrospective. Sailors did not wake one morning and discover that a golden age had officially begun. Routes widened from the Caribbean toward North American ports, the African coast, Madagascar, the Red Sea approaches, and Indian Ocean commerce. European wars placed more armed private vessels at sea. Colonial markets learned how to absorb goods of uncertain origin. Experienced seamen learned both the work of capture and the weaknesses of distant government. The War of the Spanish Succession expanded privateering after 1701. It created employment, commissions, armed ships, and crews accustomed to taking enemy property. The peace settlements beginning at Utrecht in 1713 withdrew much of that authorization. Peace did not transform every privateer into a pirate. Many sailors found lawful berths, returned to coastal work, entered naval or merchant service, or disappeared into the broad economy of ports. Others faced lower wages, delayed pay, harsh discipline, or fewer chances at a large share. Some joined men they already knew. Some were captured and compelled. Some saw an armed vessel and chose robbery because robbery appeared profitable. Demobilization was therefore a condition, not a complete explanation. Piracy also needed weak administration, buyers, information, repair sites, and routes rich enough to support cruising. It needed sailors able to navigate, maintain rigging, handle cannon, preserve food, bargain with suppliers, and recognize a worthwhile prize. A collection of angry men on a beach was not yet a pirate company. A seaworthy hull and a cooperative market mattered as much as resentment. The returning privateer at the harbor mouth stood at the center of this system. He carried a commission, but the prize court still had to accept his conduct. The captured captain carried papers of his own. Merchants waiting ashore had money tied to the result. Governors weighed policy against local profit. Admiralty officials considered whether the target truly belonged to an enemy. Every person could describe the same capture differently without treating the legal answer as a joke. When governments later strengthened piracy law, they did not merely define robbery. They tried to solve the practical problem of prosecution far from England. The act conventionally dated 1698, which received royal assent under the calendar arrangements of 1700, allowed overseas admiralty commissions to hear piracy cases. A panel of qualified commissioners could receive testimony and decide guilt without sending every defendant across the Atlantic. The statute also reached beyond a dramatic boarding. It addressed aiding pirates, receiving their goods, disguising attacks under foreign commissions, running away with a vessel, corrupting a crew, and making a revolt. Those provisions reveal what officials feared. Pirates survived because people on land handled their property. They survived because colonial distance slowed judgment. They emerged not only when one ship attacked another, but when sailors seized authority inside their own hull. The law followed the stolen sugar into warehouses and followed disobedience down into the forecastle. It joined market, mutiny, and maritime robbery in one expanding field of punishment. No flag permanently fixed a sailor's identity. A man could serve aboard a merchant vessel, enter a privateer during war, accept a pirate share after capture, then seek a royal pardon. A captain could possess valid authority for one seizure and face a piracy charge for another. A buccaneer could become an official. A governor could welcome a raider and later order his arrest. The boundaries were crossed, but they did not vanish. The most important crossing often began before any strange sail appeared. It began when a lawful ship lay idle, Wages failed to arrive, provisions thinned, and the crew decided that the master's papers no longer answered their own problem. The commission might remain safely folded in a chest. Authority depended on whether the sailors still agreed to carry it. Agreement could fail while a vessel remained tied to an ordinary quay. In the Spanish port of Corunna in 1694, the ship called Charles II waited as part of a private venture against French interests. Pay was delayed. The voyage stalled. Men who had signed on for armed employment watched time pass, while promises lost weight. A ship prepared for violence abroad had become a workplace dispute, floating within sight of shore. Henry Every served aboard her. His earlier life is not securely recovered, and later fame supplied more biography than the records can carry. The decisive fact is the mutiny. Every and other crewman took control of the vessel, left men who would not join them, and sailed away. They renamed the ship Fancy. The act changed more than the lettering at the stern. A vessel intended to operate under commission had been removed from its lawful command by its own crew. The men did not need to think of themselves in the language a court would later use. They might describe unpaid wages, failed leadership, broken undertakings, or opportunity. The law could describe revolt, theft of a ship, and piracy. Both accounts began with the same deck and the same decision. Collective action could feel like protection against a master to those taking part, and like a capital offense to officials ashore. Life aboard merchant and naval ships gave crews reasons for anger without producing one universal road to piracy. Wages might be low or delayed. Captains could exercise broad disciplinary power. Food spoiled. Illness spread. Voyages lasted longer than promised. Owners and masters held advantages in information and law. A sailor injured or discharged abroad might have little security. These pressures were common enough to make a promise of shares attractive, but most mistreated seamen did not seize their vessels. Hard work explains dissatisfaction better than it explains any single mutiny. Profit mattered. An ordinary wage placed most of a voyage's gain in the hands of owners and merchants. A pirate agreement might offer a recognized crewman a direct share in captured property. That share was uncertain and could prove worthless, but the scale of a rich prize encouraged unreasonable arithmetic. A man did not need a theory of social rebellion to prefer one uncertain large payment over another season of unpaid labor. He needed confidence, companions, and a willingness to risk the court's answer. Companionship mattered as well. Sailors moved through ports and vessels in networks. Men who had served together knew one another's skills and grudges. A mutiny required enough trust to act before the master or loyal crew could stop it. Joining a familiar messmate differed from stepping alone onto a strange pirate deck. Some followed leaders. Some feared being left in a foreign port. Some may have agreed only after it became clear which side controlled the weapons and sails. That last uncertainty appears repeatedly in piracy trials. Defendants said they had been forced. The claim could be true. Pirate crews took sailors from prizes because they needed navigators, carpenters, surgeons, coopers, gunners, and ordinary hands. Captives might be threatened, confined, watched, or denied a chance to leave. Some escaped at the first opportunity. Some refused to take part in attacks. Trial witnesses sometimes distinguished these men from active organizers. The claim could also be useful. Once captured, a defendant had every reason to describe himself as a prisoner who had never accepted a share, carried a weapon, or joined a boarding party. Courts examined conduct because presence alone did not always reveal consent. A man might begin under compulsion and later participate. Another might accept food and perform necessary work while still waiting to escape. A third might have volunteered and then discovered, rather late, that compulsion sounded better before Admiralty commissioners. No fixed proportion settles the matter. Pirate companies contained willing members, coerced workers, captives, and people whose position changed. The categories used by courts could clarify one case and conceal another. Testimony was shaped by memory, fear, bargains with prosecutors, and the simple fact that surviving witnesses knew the verdict might decide whether someone lived. The statute conventionally dated 1698 treated mutiny as part of the machinery of piracy. Its language reached sailors who made revolt in a ship, ran away with it, or attempted to corrupt a master or crew. That choice was practical. A government trying to suppress sea robbery could not wait until the stolen vessel took its first prize. The transfer of control itself created an armed, mobile company outside lawful command. For the mutineers, however, control still had to be made workable. Someone had to navigate out of harbor. Someone had to manage sail. Food, water, powder, tools, and loyalty had to be counted. A successful vote at midnight did not repair canvas at dawn. The old hierarchy might be rejected, but competence remained stubbornly useful. Every's company took asterisk fancy south and east, entering the long routes that connected Atlantic ports, the African coast, Madagascar, and Indian Ocean shipping. The later capture that made him famous belonged to another stage of the story. At Karuna, the important point is smaller. A delayed privateering venture produced a pirate vessel through mutiny, showing how close commissioned violence and unauthorized violence could sit without being the same thing. Other crews crossed the line differently. Some privateers continued questionable attacks when peace narrowed their authority. Some merchant sailors joined after their vessel surrendered. Some men were recruited in taverns with promises of shares. Some moved from one pirate vessel to another as prizes were taken, stripped, exchanged, or abandoned. Some were servants or enslaved people whose choices cannot be reduced to the language of enlistment at all. Stede Bonnet provides an awkward contrast to every account built entirely around forecastle hardship. Bonnet was a Barbados property owner and militia major. He bought a sloop, named it Revenge, and hired a crew. The later tale that marital unhappiness drove him to piracy offers a neat domestic explanation unsupported by firm contemporary evidence. His entry was unusual precisely because he had resources and did not need to lead a mutiny aboard an employer's ship. Bonnet's example does not cancel the labor story. It prevents the labor story from becoming a costume fitted to everyone. Piracy drew men through different doors. An unpaid seaman, an ambitious officer, a coerced captive, a discharged privateer, and a wealthy amateur could arrive on the same coast carrying very different reasons. Their later trial records might then compress them under one charge. Even inside a functioning pirate company, consent remained unstable. Crews could elect or depose officers under shipboard agreements. A captain who avoided a fight, concealed plunder, or ignored agreed rules might lose command. Such action looked orderly from within the company. From the state's position, order among robbers did not restore the stolen authority of the original master. The tension was not merely philosophical. It shaped who controlled keys, weapons, boats, and information. A captain needed enough authority to act quickly during pursuit or combat. Crewmen who feared another tyrant wanted ways to restrain him. A quartermaster might supervise provisions and division. Articles might define shares and punish desertion. Yet any arrangement depended on recognized membership. A captive carpenter ordered to work did not gain a vote merely because accepted crewmen had won. Every and his companions had solved only the first problem when they sailed from Karuna. They possessed a capable ship, and they had escaped the immediate reach of the venture's owners. Ahead lay the more patient requirements of piracy: water that remained drinkable, food that did not run out, a hull free enough of growth to keep its speed, safe ground for repair, local knowledge, and merchants willing to turn a stolen cargo into useful supplies. A ship could be taken in an evening and lost over many quiet weeks. Leaking seams, fouled planks, damaged rigging, sickness, contrary wind, and an empty barrel were less memorable than mutiny, but they were harder to vote away. The crew that had rejected one master now depended upon tides, timber, pilots, and the uncertain welcome of a coast. The coast offered no welcome merely because a crew needed one. A narrow opening between shoals could hide a small vessel from a deeper warship, but the same shoal could hold the smaller hull until wind and tide finished with it. A cove that looked secret from offshore might contain no fresh water. A beach fit for landing might leave a careened ship exposed to anyone who had followed. Concealment was one requirement among many, and often not the most important. North Carolina's outer coast demonstrated the bargain. Shoals, sounds, bars, and inlets made navigation difficult for strangers. A sailor who knew local channels could move a shallow vessel where a heavier pursuer hesitated. Ocracoke offered anchorage and passages through the barrier islands. Beaufort Inlet opened toward another protected waterway. Cape Fear lay farther south around its river approaches. Later pirate stories blurred them into one convenient hidden cove. They were separate places with separate depths, hazards, settlements, and events. A useful anchorage needed shelter from prevailing weather and enough water beneath the keel. It needed an exit that did not become a trap when the wind shifted. Fresh water mattered immediately. So did food, firewood, and timber. Crewmen needed space to mend sails, splice rope, shape replacement parts, and inspect the hull. If the ship required major work, the ground and tide had to permit it. If local people refused supplies or informed authorities, a beautifully hidden inlet became a poor address. Hull maintenance imposed its own ritual. Warm water encouraged marine growth, and shipworm could damage exposed timber. Weed and shell increased drag. A slower ship lost one of the chief advantages of cruising. Seams worked loose. Planking suffered from groundings and ordinary strain. None of this waited politely for a quiet season. Careening meant bringing the vessel to suitable ground and heeling it far enough to expose the lower hull. Weight might be removed or shifted. Masts, tackles, anchors, and lines helped pull the ship over. Crewmen cleaned growth, inspected planks, replaced damaged wood, and renewed caulking and seams. The work demanded carpenters, labor, tools, materials, favorable tide, and time. During it, the vessel that usually offered escape could not simply sail away. Security, therefore, entered every repair decision. Lookouts watched approaches. Smaller boats remained useful. A friendly settlement could provide warning and labor. An empty island offered privacy, but no spare rope, medicine, flour, or news. The romantic cove became much less romantic when a barrel split and the nearest cooper lived beside a talkative customs official. Pirate companies used public or half-governed ports because people were as necessary as geography. A merchant could buy cargo, extend credit, or arrange supplies. A tavern carried news of departures, naval patrols, and political changes. A local pilot knew which channel had shifted. An official could delay a warrant. A governor might condemn piracy in a proclamation, while associates traded with its proceeds. Hiddenness often meant social ambiguity rather than physical invisibility. New Providence in the Bahamas became valuable in this way. Its position lay near heavily traveled routes through the western Atlantic and Caribbean. Its harbor and surrounding waters supported small cruising vessels. Government had weakened, while sailors, suppliers, and traders gathered. Information traveled through the anchorage. Damaged vessels could be worked on. Prizes could be examined and redistributed. The place was not a formal pirate nation with a secure constitution. It was a port where imperial authority had become too thin to control daily exchange. Calling it a republic gives disorder a tidy flag and makes later history easy to package. The evidence supports a pirate-dominated haven, not a recognized state with universal citizenship, stable institutions, and a surviving national charter. Individual crews might follow their own articles. That did not create one civil government ashore. The harbor worked because many arrangements remained temporary, personal, and profitable. Farther away, Madagascar settlements connected Atlantic seamen to Indian Ocean routes. Ile Sainte-Marie and other sites offered places for repair and exchange. Merchants supplied pirate communities and received Asian goods, coin, and enslaved people. Local Malagasy rulers and communities negotiated, traded, intermarried, resisted, allied, and fought with newcomers under changing conditions. Europeans did not discover an empty island waiting to become a lair. The great cruising route, sometimes called the Pirate Round, depended on these relationships. A vessel leaving North America or the Caribbean crossed toward Africa, passed around the Cape Route, and used Madagascar before approaching Red Sea and Indian shipping. Winds and seasons shaped movement. Intelligence about merchant departures mattered. Provisions purchased at one stop made the next leg possible. Stolen goods from one ocean could enter trade in another through people whose names rarely appeared in captain-centered tales. The fictional colony Libertalia later gave Madagascar an egalitarian pirate state more polished than the evidence permits. Its story belongs to the literary tradition associated with the second volume, published under the name Captain Charles Johnson. Independent support is inadequate. Real settlements were more complicated and less convenient. They joined local politics, slavery, commerce, family ties, violence, and repair. Fiction removed much of that work and added a constitution. Caribbean buccaneers also depended on knowledge and labor that their European narrators often treated as incidental. Indigenous pilots guided vessels and boats through unfamiliar coasts. Hunters and food suppliers sustained expeditions. Paddlers and allies made inland and coastal movement possible. Other indigenous people were raided, compelled, displaced, or captured. The relationships changed by place and campaign. There was no empty tropical margin inhabited only when a raider needed scenery. Water tied all these places together. A large crew consumed it quickly, and storage altered its quality. Rain could help, but could not be scheduled. Springs might lie inland from an anchorage. Filling casks required boats and repeated trips, each one exposing men to local observation. Food created similar problems. Salted provisions traveled, while fresh produce and meat required exchange or foraging. Scurvy and other illness made fresh supplies more than a comfort. Timber looked abundant from offshore, but useful repair wood required selection, cutting, shaping, and transport. Pitch, oakum, ironwork, and canvas could not always be improvised. A damaged mast demanded skill and leverage. A torn sail consumed thread, needles, and patient labor. Pirate independence rested on the same trades that kept merchant shipping alive. Large prizes complicated the advantages of shallow water. A deeper captured ship might carry more cannon and cargo, but it could not follow a sloop through every inlet. Its crew requirement was greater. Its hull took longer to careen. A bar that protected the smaller vessel might ground the flagship. Keeping a prestigious prize could therefore exchange speed and access for strength and storage. Captains and crews repeatedly chose whether to transfer, strip, retain, or abandon ships. Local markets completed the decision. Cargo with no buyer became ballast with ambitions. Cloth, sugar, coin, weapons, or enslaved captives had value only through use or exchange. Perishable goods imposed a clock. Bulky goods occupied room needed for water and provisions. A crew might take what it could carry, sell at a discount, or leave a prize after removing sails and tools. The deserted hull was not evidence that pirates despised wealth. It was evidence that wealth at sea had weight. The hidden cove survives because it offers a clean image of freedom from ordinary society. The working anchorage reveals the opposite. Pirates needed local knowledge, skilled trades, markets, food systems, political protection, and the labor of communities they did not control completely. Their vessels moved outside lawful command, while depending on the lawful and unlawful economies of ports. When the tide returned beneath a repaired hull, concealment gave way to calculation. Depth had to be measured. Provisions had to be counted. The carpenter's work had to hold. Beyond the bar waited another choice between a quick, small vessel and a heavy prize, and that choice rested on tools rather than legend. The first tool over the side might be a lead weight. Lowered on a marked line, it gave the crew a measure of depth before the keel discovered the answer less gently. A hollow in the base could bring up a trace of sand, shell, or mud, helping an experienced navigator compare the seabed with written directions. Near shoals and unfamiliar entrances, the sounding lead turned uncertain water into a series of small decisions. Navigation aboard a pirate vessel was skilled work, not a mysterious instinct. Dividers helped transfer distances across charts. Sectors and other mathematical instruments supported calculation. A universal staff mount, surveying equipment, scale weights, coin weights, and a survey chain recovered from the Beaufort wreck show a company surrounded by measurement. Some objects may have belonged to the earlier French vessel or its cargo. Their presence still reveals the technical world available aboard the ship Blackbeard later commanded. Pirates usually did not build a special class of pirate ship. They acquired vessels already shaped for trade, fishing, war, or trafficking. A fast sloop could approach and escape, work through shallow water, and sail with fewer hands. A larger vessel could carry more men, provisions, prizes, and guns. It also drew more water, required more labor, and presented more hull to maintain. Every capture invited an appraisal. The hull came first. Rot, leaking seams, fouling, and past damage could make an impressive prize useless. Rigging and sail followed. A ship with tall masts and broad canvas gained speed only if the crew could maintain and handle them. Storage had to suit the intended route. Water and food for a large company consumed space rapidly. Cannon added weight. So did powder, shot, spare rope, anchors, boats, and whatever cargo had not yet been sold. Names changed more easily than structures. Henry Every's company, renamed Charles II, as *fancy*. Blackbeard renamed the French slave ship *La Concorde* as *Queen Anne's Revenge*. Samuel Bellamy took the London slave ship *Wid a gal e*, and used it as a flagship. William Kidd sailed in the purpose-built Adventure galley *, but later transferred attention and fortune to the captured Quai da Merchant *. Each change of name encouraged later storytellers to imagine a new identity. Timber retained its earlier work. A captured slaver might offer speed, capacity, and a hull designed for an ocean crossing. It also carried the history of trafficking in its arrangement, paperwork, equipment, and human consequences. A merchant vessel might be valuable as cargo, and then useful as transport. A prize with recognized papers could create legal trouble more durable than its planks. Ships had several lives at once, and a pirate phase was often brief. Armament mattered partly because a prize was most useful when it still floated. Cannon could disable rigging, signal overwhelming strength, or persuade a merchant captain to surrender. A warning shot, superior numbers, threatening colors, and reputation could avoid a damaging exchange. Pirates did fight armed opponents, but an extended battle risked the very hull, cargo, and skilled people they hoped to take. The Beaufort assemblage contains a mixed collection of cannon and ammunition rather than a neat matched battery. Archaeologists located many guns of varying origin, along with round shot, bar shot, firearm pieces, lead covers for cannon touch holes, and remains interpreted as grenades. The collection suggests adaptation from available weapons. It does not resemble a theatrical rack devoted mainly to polished cutlasses. As of the published project count, no complete bladed weapon had been recovered there. Mixed guns demanded practical knowledge. Crews needed the correct shot, powder, tools, and procedures for each piece. Iron corroded, carriages strained, touch holes had to be protected. Powder needed dry storage, an achievement that weather did not always assist. A heavily armed ship carried not only weapons, but a maintenance system. Carpentry tools, grindstones, needles, and rigging equipment belonged to that system. The ship's survival depended on routine inspection and repair. Sailcloth tore, blocks wore, lines chafed, wooden pumps, barrels, and fittings leaked. A carpenter or sailmaker taken from a prize might be more valuable than another eager fighter. Skill could also explain why some captives remained under coercion when a pirate company had no intention of granting them full membership. Food left quieter evidence. Barrel hoops survived where the wooden staves often did not. Ceramic and glass vessels held water, drink, and other stores. Pewter plates and serving pieces suggest meals or cargo, though fabric impressions preserved on some pewter indicate that the objects may have been packed merchandise. About 24 animal bones from the Beaufort site were interpreted mostly as food remains. A bone establishes consumption more readily than it establishes whose plate received it. barrels organized much of shipboard life. They held water, salted food, drink, powder, and trade goods. A cooper's judgment affected whether provisions survived a voyage. Casks had to fit limited space and remain accessible. Empty containers might be refilled ashore. A damaged hoop or leaking stave could quietly reduce the distance a ship was able to cruise. Medicine was both equipment and prize. Mortars and pestles, weights, and other pharmaceutical tools appear among maritime finds. A medicine chest could contain compounds for common shipboard needs, though its contents depended on owner, voyage, and survival. Scurvy, dysentery, fever, contaminated water, infection, and ordinary injury could reduce a crew without a shot fired. Fresh food, cleanliness, rest, and luck mattered beside any bottle. Blackbeard's later demand for medicine during the Charleston blockade gives these objects a human scale. The demand was not a decorative flourish in a fearsome career. It suggests a crew facing a health problem serious enough to hold ships and people while supplies were sought. A mortar and pestle on a wreck, and a medicine chest in a written account meet at the ordinary fact that armed men still became ill. The workday also included cooking, steering, pumping, lookout duty, sail changes, cleaning, and the endless management of rope. More crew could make capture easier and labor lighter, but more mouths accelerated consumption. A company swollen by recruits from prizes might soon need another prize simply to provision itself. Success created appetite. Captured goods had to be sorted with the ship's needs in mind. Sails, rope, anchors, weapons, instruments, food, and medicine could be transferred immediately. Cloth and other cargo might be divided or sold. Coin was easy to share and carry, which helped make it memorable. But coin was not the usual whole of a prize. The useful vessel itself could be the largest item taken. Keeping that vessel required another crew or the abandonment of the old ship. Pirates sometimes spread men across several prizes, only to concentrate again when danger approached. A slow captured merchantman might serve temporarily as a storehouse. A damaged hull might be stripped. A superior ship might receive the company, while the previous favorite was left behind. The supposed pirate fleet was often a changing collection of tools. This practical flexibility separated survival from spectacle. No one navigated successfully by pointing toward a hand-drawn X. A route came from charts, remembered bearings, astronomical and mathematical practice, soundings, pilots, wind, and repeated correction. No ship remained formidable because its name frightened people. It remained formidable because crewmen knew how to keep water out, canvas drawing, stores usable, and weapons credible. Once those systems worked, the company needed something worth taking. That need turned every sail on the horizon into a problem of speed, nationality, resistance, cargo, and resale. Most answers led to rope, food, cloth, or another hull. One voyage led instead toward a Moo Gull ship returning to Surat, where the value of a prize would be measured in diplomatic consequences as well as silver. The sail belonged to a world much larger than the company approaching it. Henry Every, the mutineer whose crew had taken and renamed Fancy Asterisk, carried his voyage into the Indian Ocean. He did not cross an empty blue space toward vaguely eastern treasure. He entered routes joining ports, rulers, pilgrims, merchants, and communities with their own laws and expectations. The pirate round was not one straight passage marked on a chart. Ships leaving North America or the Caribbean needed Atlantic provisions, favorable seasons, a way around the Cape, and places to repair. Madagascar settlements linked incoming pirates with local suppliers and traders. News of shipping moved through those exchanges. Asian cloth, coin, weapons, provisions, and enslaved people moved in several directions. Each leg depended on decisions made far from the famous capture. Most prizes were practical. A small merchant vessel might provide flour, wine, rope, canvas, medicine, tools, powder, or a better boat. Cloth could be divided or sold. A ship might be kept, stripped, or released after valuables were removed. Captives could be coerced into work, put ashore, ransomed, sold, or carried onward. The company needed buyers because many goods could not remain aboard indefinitely. A hold full of bulky merchandise was wealth with storage costs. Merchants in colonial ports and around Madagascar helped stolen property return to ordinary-looking commerce. They offered credit, supplies, and information. Some had links reaching to New York and other North American markets. Piracy was not an economy floating apart from society. Its goods crossed into households, warehouses, and further voyages through transactions made by people who never stood beneath a black flag. Every's company was hunting on a scale that made ordinary stores look small. In September 1695, it joined an attack on Mughal shipping returning from the Red Sea region. One target was the Gunge, Isa, associated with the Emperor Aurangzeb's realm and bound towards Surat. The vessel carried commercial wealth and passengers, connected with the Hajj routes through Mocha and Jeddah. Its identity was political, religious, and commercial before it became a pirate prize. Surat was a major Mughal port. English merchants there operated under the authority of an empire that did not need to accept London's preferred distinction between a rogue English captain and English corporate interests. The East India Company depended on permission, negotiation, and local protection. Every's freedom at sea could therefore become another English institution's danger ashore. The Gunge, Isa, was not helpless by design. Near contemporary Mughal writing described it as heavily armed and carried claims about the enormous value aboard. Kafi Khan's Persian chronicle later gave a figure of 52 lakhs of rupees. Such a number belongs to a historical source with its own perspective, not to a modern audited inventory. Its value here lies in the scale Mughal writers attached to the loss and the outrage surrounding it. The capture involved robbery, severe mistreatment, and sexual violence. That fact cannot be removed merely because the subject is uncomfortable, since doing so would turn the episode back into a cheerful tale of treasure. It also needs no lurid reconstruction. The restrained record is enough. Passengers and crew suffered while the attackers divided wealth, and Mughal accounts remembered a violation of people and sovereignty, not the lucky retirement of an English adventurer. From Surat, the affair looked very different from the later legend of Evry. Aurangzeb's government detained English traders and placed pressure on East India Company settlements. Officials demanded accountability and security. The company tried to demonstrate that it did not command the pirate and could not simply produce him. Mughal authorities had little reason to treat that separation as morally complete when English maritime power, private trade, armed ventures, and piracy overlapped in personnel and infrastructure. The crisis exposed the cost of distant private violence. A pirate company captured one ship. Merchants elsewhere faced confinement and commercial danger. Diplomats and corporate officials negotiated consequences. Shipping systems considered new protections. Evry's prize had passed beyond the private arithmetic of shares. It became an imperial confrontation. The attackers dispersed. Some participants were eventually caught and tried. Evry was not. His ultimate fate remains unknown. That absence created one of the most durable spaces in pirate legend. A captured pirate offered courts a final scene. A vanished one offered printers as many endings as they could sell. Stories later married Evry to a Mughal princess or made him founder of a distant kingdom. The princess tale transformed an attack on Mughal pilgrims and commerce into a romance centered on the attacker. It also supplied a royal woman where the record supplied uncertainty. There is no secure basis for the marriage. Evry's disappearance is the firmer and more revealing fact. It reveals how difficult suppression remained in the 1690s. A capable ship could cross jurisdictions, exchange goods through intermediaries, divide its company, and discard its name. News moved slowly, and identification depended on description and testimony. Governments could publish rewards and orders, but a man ashore in ordinary clothing did not carry a permanent black flag above his head. The exceptional nature of the prize mattered too. If rich pilgrim ships had been captured every week, the asterisk Gunj I, so why asterisk would not have caused the same shock or inspired the same fantasies. Most pirate voyages consumed time and supplies while seeking less magnificent targets. Some ended in wreck, capture, illness, or a division too small to justify the risk. The legendary chest preserves the outlier and quietly disposes of the barrels of flour. Even a spectacular haul presented immediate problems. Coin and precious material could be divided, but goods required valuation. Officers and specialists might claim larger shares. Owners of cooperating vessels expected portions. Disputes could begin before the cargo was safely moved. Men who believed they had accepted equal danger watched carefully when someone else controlled the keys. Pirate companies needed rules not because they were naturally fair, but because armed partners with uncertain profit were dangerous to one another. A captain useful during pursuit might be suspected during division. A quartermaster trusted with stores might become a rival center of power. Injury could remove a sailor's future earning ability. Desertion during an engagement could place everyone at risk. Gambling could transfer shares before they existed. The agreements that addressed these matters were attached to particular companies. They did not descend as one code from a pirate authority. They drew on older maritime practices, privateering contracts, buccaneer sharing arrangements, and the immediate needs of a cruise. Some were written. Some are known only because hostile or commercially minded sources recorded them. All depended on who counted as a member. On the deck after a capture, that question was visible. Accepted crewmen expected division. A coerced navigator might stand nearby without a voice. Captives waited to learn whether they would be released, retained, or sold. Enslaved people aboard the prize faced choices largely controlled by others. A system could limit a captain's arbitrary power among partners, while remaining harsh to everyone beyond the agreement. Every's vanished company left fragments rather than a complete constitution. The broader evidence still shows why rules appeared. Once a prize crossed the rail, the company had to turn violence into portions, provisions, and continued cooperation. The treasure did not end the voyage. It began the argument over who owned the shipboard order. Order began with a list of terms rather than a universal code. Before or during a cruise, crewmen could agree on shares, duties, access to provisions, discipline, and the authority of officers. Such articles gave armed partners a common reference when memory became conveniently inventive. They also told everyone what conduct might cost a share, an office, or a place in the company. The idea was not born outside maritime society. Merchant crews, naval vessels, privateers, and buccaneers already used contracts, customs, wage scales, prize shares, and rules of discipline. Exquemelin described agreements among 17th century buccaneers. Privateering ventures arranged returns between owners, officers, and crew. Pirates borrowed from this world and altered it for companies operating without a lawful owner above them. No complete archive of pirate agreements survives. Some terms appeared in trials and depositions. Many familiar sets of articles come through the anonymous author writing as Captain Charles Johnson in the 1720s. That book used real reports while adding scenes and speeches, and its editions changed. Articles preserved there may reflect genuine practice, literary arrangement, or a combination. They are evidence that requires attribution, not stone tablets recovered from the sea. The clauses differed. Some reported agreements addressed voting in major affairs and gave accepted members access to provisions. Some assigned shares by role. A captain might receive more than an ordinary crewman, with the quartermaster, master, gunner, boatswain, carpenter, or other specialists receiving defined portions. Some provided compensation when injury reduced a man's ability to work. The amounts and conditions varied by company. Other terms governed daily friction. Arms were to be maintained. Lights might be put out at a stated hour, leaving anyone wishing to drink to do so on the open deck. Gambling could be restricted. Quarrels might be settled in a prescribed way. Desertion during danger, concealing plunder, or cheating the company could bring severe punishment. Some reported articles barred women or boys from being brought aboard. No clause can safely be assigned to every pirate vessel. Share systems gave members a reason to watch the capture and division process. An owner on land did not automatically take the largest return in the familiar merchant pattern. Accepted pirates could expect direct participation in proceeds. This was meaningfully different from a flat wage, yet it was not perfect equality. Rank shares persisted. Skilled roles mattered. Membership itself was guarded. The captain's authority could also be divided. Some pirate crews elected a captain and could remove him. His command was strongest during chase, combat, or immediate danger, when a long debate about sail trim would have been an excellent way to lose a prize. Outside those moments, a quartermaster might supervise stores, settle disputes, represent crew interests, and oversee division. The arrangement could reduce a captain's ability to become an unchecked master. Economist Peter Leeson interprets these institutions as practical checks and balances. Pirates faced what might be called internal predation, the danger that their own leader would take more than agreed or use authority for private advantage. Elections, articles, divided offices, and compensation helped a criminal enterprise function. Under this view, governance emerged because cooperation was profitable. Historian Edward Fox places greater emphasis on continuity. Pirate articles resembled practices already present at sea and ashore. Their participants sought improved status and protection within a recognizable maritime framework, rather than a complete social revolution. A captain restrained by custom was not an invention unique to pirates, nor did a vote over prizes turn a company into a modern democracy. The two approaches do not require a choice between order and imitation. Some crews created real limits on officers, and they did so using tools available from the society around them. A borrowed rule can still matter to a sailor whose captain cannot seize his share without challenge. A vote can still be significant, even when it excludes most people aboard. Exclusion is the part the democracy legend tends to place in small print. Forced men might lack votes and shares. Captives had no guaranteed standing. Enslaved people, servants, boys, and temporary workers could live under the company's authority without belonging to its political body. A black seaman might be a recognized skilled member in one record, and coerced labor or saleable property in another. The evidence does not support one universal status. An agreement among accepted pirates protected those accepted pirates. It could produce a broad distribution of provisions while leaving captive passengers hungry. It could compensate an injured gunner while permitting enslaved people from a prize to be sold. It could restrain the captain and prescribe harsh penalties. Shipboard fairness had boundaries, as fairness so often does when the people writing the rules also write the membership list. The office of quartermaster illustrates both practical need and later simplification. Stores had to be counted, watches arranged, disputes handled, and plunder divided. Concentrating some of that work outside the captain's hands could reassure the crew. Yet not every company followed the same model, and surviving descriptions often come from authors eager to explain pirate government as a coherent curiosity. Practice likely shifted with personality, vessel, and circumstance. The power to depose a captain appears in the story of Charles Vane. According to Johnson, Vane's company encountered a vessel he judged too strong, later understood to be a French warship. His refusal to engage helped provoke a vote removing him, and Jack Rackham rose in his place. The episode is plausible within reported pirate governance, but its detail depends chiefly on a source that enjoyed rounded character scenes. It should remain Johnson's account rather than an overheard debate reproduced word for word. From the crew's perspective, removing a captain for alleged cowardice could enforce the purpose of the venture. From a calm distance, declining combat with a warship has a certain practical charm. A company built around taking prizes still depended on its reputation for pursuing them. If officers repeatedly avoided risk while expecting larger shares, the agreement lost force. Combat authority created the opposite danger. A popular vote during a chase could be too slow. Captains needed discretion when wind, distance, and sail changed by the minute. Articles, therefore, could preserve hierarchy in danger while limiting it in ordinary time. The system was not simply democratic or tyrannical. It was an attempt to manage both speed and suspicion. Injury compensation addressed another form of uncertainty. Lawful employers offered little reliable protection to many disabled seamen. A pirate agreement promising a set amount for loss of working capacity converted shared proceeds into crude insurance. This could strengthen willingness to fight and acknowledge that bodily risk was not equal in consequence. It did not make violence gentle. It made its economic aftermath a company concern. Rules concerning arms, lights, drink, and disputes performed similar work. A loaded weapon poorly maintained endangered the ship. A light near combustible stores carried obvious risk. A drunken quarrel could divide men whose cooperation was needed at dawn. A concealed jewel threatened trust because no later calculation could divide what had disappeared. The articles were less a romantic declaration than a manual for preventing an armed partnership from consuming itself. Their authority ended where enforcement failed. A powerful faction could ignore a clause. A captain could depart with loyal followers. A dissatisfied crewman could desert. A captured company could present its rules as evidence of collective crime. Paper offered internal order, but no shield against admiralty law. It also offered no port. Shares of cloth required buyers. Injured men required shelter. Powder and provisions required replacement. Information about pardons and patrols arrived from shore. The pirate company could arrange authority on its own deck, but it could not vote a harbor into existence. In New Providence, that dependence would meet a royal proclamation designed to separate those ready to leave piracy from those still committed to its uncertain bargains. The proclamation arrived as both an exit and an invitation to betrayal. Issued at Whitehall on the 5th of September, 1717, in the name of George I, it offered pardon to pirates who surrendered within its terms by the 5th of September, 1718. The promise applied to qualifying earlier offenses, not to every robbery a man might choose to commit afterward. Its calendar was part of its weapon. Rewards stood beside mercy. The proclamation offered graded sums for the capture of pirates, with higher rank bringing greater payment. A crew that delivered its commander could profit from the act. The arrangement encouraged each company to divide itself. Men who feared capture could seek pardon. Men who distrusted their captain could consider a reward. Leaders who wanted to continue cruising had to wonder which boat might leave during the night. New Providence gave the policy a concentrated audience. The haven had grown useful because imperial government there was weak. Its location near major routes, its anchorages, and its community of sailors and traders supported repair, exchange, and news. Crews came and went rather than forming one stable national body. The later phrase Republic of Pirates makes the harbor sound more constitutional than its surviving institutions allow. After the peace settlements beginning at Utrecht in 1713, the wider maritime labor market had changed. Commissions ended or narrowed. Armed vessels and experienced crews remained. Some men moved into lawful employment, while others entered piracy through old associations, captured ships, low wages, or opportunity. New Providence did not create every cause. It gathered their results where administration could not easily dislodge them. A pardon offered the government a cheaper instrument than hunting every vessel. It recognized that pirate companies were not equally committed. Some men had joined recently. Some had property or family ties ashore. Some had little profit to show for the danger. Some had been coerced. A deadline turned these differences into pressure. Acceptance required judgment. A pirate had to decide whether authorities would honor the terms, whether his offenses qualified, and whether lawful work remained possible. Surrender could protect him from earlier acts while leaving him exposed for later ones. A captain might accept and then return to raiding. A crewman might accept and inform against former companions. Mercy was not the opposite of suppression. It was one method of it. Wood's Rogers arrived at New Providence on the 26th of July, 1718, before the surrender deadline expired. He did not come alone with a rolled proclamation and an optimistic expression. His mission combined royal authority, merchant investment, naval support, soldiers, vessels, and plans for restoring government. The harbor had to be occupied, defended, supplied, and made economically useful under a new order. Rogers understood private enterprise because he had been a privateering commander himself. That background did not make piracy and privateering identical. It gave him knowledge of armed voyages, investors, prize expectations, and the fragile loyalties of crews. He carried the Crown's policy into a port where official words had previously lacked enough material support. Government required masonry as well as law. Fortifications needed repair. Guns needed positions and crews. Soldiers and officials needed food and pay. Courts needed authority and records. Merchants needed confidence that property and contracts would be protected. A governor unable to provision his own settlement would struggle to persuade pirates that the old haven had truly changed. Private financing made the project vulnerable. Investors expected development and trade, not merely an expensive moral demonstration. Supplies were difficult. Disease and weather did not pause while administration was reorganized. Rogers's achievement lay less in a single heroic expulsion than in making imperial rule credible enough to alter daily choices. The pardon divided the harbor. Some pirates surrendered and entered the new arrangement. Others rejected it or accepted only temporarily. Charles Vane became associated with resistance, though many colorful details pass through Johnson's later account. Crews departed. The transformation was uneven, but New Providence became less reliable as a market, repair base, and sanctuary. That loss mattered beyond the island. Pirate companies needed places where prizes could be handled openly enough to be profitable. When officials controlled a harbor, watched merchants, and maintained force, the cost of every visit rose. A ship could still hide among islands, but hiding did not refill casks or sell cloth. Suppression worked by closing the useful coast, not by removing every possible cove. Some crews shifted toward the North American coast. Others crossed toward West Africa or returned to wider Atlantic routes. Dispersal kept piracy alive while making companies more isolated. A captain farther from a secure haven needed larger stores, stronger trading contacts, or repeated captures. Repairs became harder. Information aged. A friendly merchant could become cautious when authorities demonstrated that receiving pirate goods might also be prosecuted. The proclamation's reward structure followed departing crews. It made information valuable. Former pirates could guide officials. Captured men could testify. Colonial governors could coordinate, though rivalry and jurisdictional disputes remained. Naval vessels staying on station added pressure. The system did not become efficient overnight, a condition governments have preserved with admirable consistency. Newspapers and printed notices enlarged the state presence. Names, descriptions, deadlines, and rewards traveled through ports. A pirate's reputation could frighten merchant crews, but it could also help informants identify him. Fame carried two prices. The same stories that encouraged surrender without combat made anonymous retirement more difficult. The policy still contained contradictions. Colonial economies had profited from questionable trade. Officials who now condemned pirates operated among merchants who had supplied them. Men pardoned for earlier robbery might possess goods or knowledge acquired through it. Privateering would return in later wars under lawful commissions. The state was not abolishing all private maritime violence. It was reclaiming control over who could use it. Rogers's arrival marked that recovery in one strategic harbor. Pardon removed some participants. Fortification narrowed access. Courts threatened holdouts. Merchant backing supported a replacement economy. Naval presence gave proclamations weight. Each measure was incomplete by itself. Together, they made the old pattern harder to sustain. The change can be seen through the vessels moving around it. A crew might surrender in Nassau, while another captured a merchant ship farther north. A former privateer might accept the pardon, while a coerced sailor waited for escape. Famous captains continued to operate during 1718, yet their space for repair and sail was shrinking. 2 ships captured shortly before Rogers's arrival reveal the speed of these careers. Both had been built into Atlantic slave trading. Both were converted into pirate flagships. One, commanded by Samuel Bellamy, went down in a spring storm before New Providence was restored. The other, commanded by the man called Blackbeard, blockaded a colonial port and grounded in a North Carolina inlet. Their pirate lives were brief layers placed over longer and darker commercial voyages. The first layer ended off Cape Cod, where a bell carrying a ship's name would remain under the sea, while courts ashore began sorting willing pirates from men who said they had been forced aboard. The name on the bell was *Wida*. The ship had not been built for Samuel Bellamy or for piracy. It was connected to Humphrey Morris, a prominent London merchant deeply involved in the slave trade, and designed for the commercial movement of captive Africans and colonial goods. Its strong, relatively new hull carried the purposes of that trade before a pirate company ever crossed its deck. Bellamy captured *Wid a gal e*, in early 1717. The transfer offered him a capable flagship. As with other pirate prizes, the taking changed command and use without erasing construction, past voyages, or ownership. Later romance often begins when the pirate raises a flag. The ship's history had begun inside a system of forced transportation and sale. Bellamy's secure biography is thinner than his legend. Captain Charles Johnson later placed an eloquent speech in his story, presenting Bellamy as a critic of rich men and lawful thieves. The words suit the image of a pirate philosopher and have been repeated accordingly. They were not preserved by a stenographer on deck. At best, they came through uncertain transmission. At worst, they were literary characterization. The speech tells much about the pirate readers were offered, and less certainly what Bellamy said. Material choices are firmer. Bellamy's company retained the captured ship, distributed men among vessels, and cruised along the North American coast. A large company needed prizes, provisions, and control of accompanying craft. Men aboard did not all arrive in the same way. Some were committed participants. Some came from captured ships. Some later said they had been compelled. The fleet-like arrangement made those positions difficult to recover after disaster. In April 1717, a storm struck off Cape Cod. Wida wrecked near the coast. Wind, shoals, and surf ended a pirate career that had lasted only a short time. The event needs no prolonged reconstruction of panic. Its historical consequence lies partly in the objects left together, and partly in the survivors and associates who entered legal proceedings. The Boston trial, printed that year, concerned 8 men associated with Bellamy's wider company and prizes. It did not place every defendant aboard the flagship at the instant of wreck. That distinction matters. Pirate narratives tend to gather all nearby men onto the most famous deck. Courts instead examined which vessel a man had occupied, how he arrived there, and what he had done. Forced service defenses appeared. A captured sailor could say he remained only because escape was impossible. Prosecutors and witnesses looked for conduct suggesting consent. Accepting a share, carrying arms, advising the company, joining a boarding party, or failing to leave when an opportunity arose. None of these signs answered every case. A man under watch might perform work to survive. Another might wait until capture to rediscover his reluctance. Printed proceedings preserve voices unevenly. Questions, summaries, charges, and testimony passed through official and commercial production. The pamphlet was not a modern recording. It remains valuable because it names people and sets claims close to the event. Read beside Johnson's later polished speech, its cautious distinctions show how quickly uncertain participation could become a rounded pirate character. Bellamy himself did not reach trial. His death in the wreck left printers freer to explain him. A missing defendant cannot contest a noble speech or a wicked motive. The sea supplied silence, and publication supplied personality. The wreck also preserved a different archive. Discovered in the 20th century and investigated through a private salvage and museum enterprise, the site produced a bell inscribed with the ship's name and a date. That inscription gives unusually direct support for identification. It is the sort of evidence the Beaufort wreck associated with Blackbeard does not possess. Direct identification does not settle every surrounding claim. A named bell can establish the vessel with great strength while leaving command decisions, speeches, votes, and individual status unresolved. Artifact recovery conducted within a private salvage setting can also encourage publicity about treasure totals. Archaeological inventories and documented context are more useful than superlatives designed for a brochure. Objects from the site speak in quieter categories. Coin and precious material may survive, but so do weapons, tools, fittings, containers, personal items, and the remains of an ordinary working vessel. Their positions can help explain wrecking and shipboard arrangement. Their manufacture can connect the ship with trade. None carries a label stating whether the last person who touched it volunteered. The ship's earlier slave trading purpose complicates every claim that pirate capture simply liberated those caught within Atlantic slavery. Bellamy took a vessel built for Humphrey Morris's commerce. That fact does not reveal a complete policy toward every black sailor or captive later encountered. It does prevent the pirate phase from being described as if the hull emerged innocent from a shipyard solely for an adventure. Morris's own career belonged to respectable finance and trafficking. He later became known for embezzlement connected with the Bank of England, a reminder that legality did not reliably measure kindness. The contrast between merchant respectability and piracy can expose hypocrisy without making pirates humanitarian. Both activities could depend on exploitation while receiving different treatment from law. The *Wida* story, therefore, joins several kinds of evidence. Merchant records place the ship in slave trading. Trial testimony sorts defendants after the wreck. Johnson offers a memorable but uncertain political voice. Archaeology confirms the vessel through its bell and preserves its material life. Each source answers a different question, and none should be made to answer all of them. The bell is especially tempting because it appears final. A name in metal seems to silence dispute. It identifies a ship, but the ship had changed roles. Was an object aboard because of Morris's trade, Bellamy's capture, a crewman's possession, or cargo taken from someone else? Context can narrow the possibilities. It cannot always choose one. Weather also resists moral arrangement. The storm did not distinguish a willing pirate from a forced hand. The wreck gathered them into one site while scattering documentation across courts and archives. Later recovery reversed the process slowly, object by object, while public legend again tried to gather everything under Bellamy's name. The same problem would become even clearer in North Carolina. There, another former slave ship served as a pirate flagship for roughly 7 months. Its wreck carried French commercial equipment, evidence of trafficking, ordinary maritime tools, and pirate armament. Unlike *Wida*, it offered no bell bearing the famous new name. Identification would depend on accumulation rather than inscription. Before it reached the inlet, the vessel had crossed the Atlantic under the name *La Concorde*. Hundreds of captive Africans were forced aboard. Its crew was reduced by death and illness, and a pirate company met it near Martinique. The surrender began the short life of Queen Anne's Revenge *, while the people and objects from the earlier voyage remained inconveniently real. The earlier voyage began at Nantes. French archival reconstruction describes *La Concorde* as a vessel of about 200 tons, carrying 16 cannon and 75 crew when it sailed on the 24th of March, 1717. It belonged to a commercial venture built around the Atlantic trafficking of captive Africans. By the time pirates approached near Martinique, the ship had already endured the most consequential part of its history. At Ouidah on the African coast, 516 captive people were embarked. The records also mention about 20 pounds of gold dust. During the crossing, 61 captive Africans and 16 French crewmen died, while 36 surviving crew were seriously ill. These figures come from French depositions and reconstruction, not from pirate legend. They reveal why the vessel was vulnerable when Blackbeard's company found it in November. The pirate captain's name appears in contemporary forms, including Thatch, and Teach. Edward Teach became familiar, but no single spelling unlocks a secure childhood or private biography. His early life and birthplace remain uncertain. The strongest evidence begins not with a theatrical youth, but with the exhausted French ship. After 2 pirate volleys, La Concorde surrendered. A depleted crew facing a stronger company had little reason to sacrifice the remaining people and vessel for an owner far away. Blackbeard transferred his force, renamed the ship Queen Anne's Revenge and increased its armament. The captured vessel offered capacity and presence, but it also required a large crew and deeper water than a small sloop. What happened to all the captive Africans cannot be compressed into a reassuring claim. Some evidence concerning the voyage and later outcomes continues to emerge, including a recently identified insurance record, but the introductory report does not support a complete list of fates. Pirates could retain, sell, abandon, or coerce people taken from slave ships. The simple verb freed would erase too many possibilities. For roughly 7 months, Queen Anne's Revenge served as Blackbeard's flagship. That brief period produced much of his fame. It also means that artifacts at the wreck may come from the French commercial crew, the trafficking voyage, cargo, general seamanship, or pirate modification. The ship had spent longer in other systems than under the black flag. Blackbeard cultivated reputation. Contemporary reports and Johnson's later account helped create the image of an unusually fearsome appearance. The often repeated story of slow matches arranged around his head belongs especially to Johnson's theatrical description and should not be treated as a routine, independently witnessed practice. Reputation could encourage surrender, which was economically useful. A frightening captain gained little from destroying every prize. Flags performed similar work. Period pirates used varied black and red signals with death symbols, figures, weapons, hearts, and hourglasses in reported designs. Very few actual flags survive. The horned skeleton image now assigned to Blackbeard lacks a secure direct chain to his vessel in the evidence used here. A precise modern drawing can be less reliable than a vague old description. In May 1718, Blackbeard's company stopped vessels approaching Charleston. The episode is often called a blockade because shipping was held and the harbor's movement disrupted. The demand was not for a royal treasury. It was for a medicine chest. hostages were retained, while associates went ashore to obtain it. The demand shows a crew under pressure from health and scarcity. Medicine could be worth the political risk of alarming a major colonial port. The company had cannon and a formidable vessel, yet illness imposed its own command. Mortars, pestles, weights, and other medical tools, later recovered at Beaufort, fit this practical maritime world. Though no single object can be tied directly to the Charleston demand. After receiving supplies, the pirates released the hostages and departed. The restraint should not be mistaken for kindness alone. Keeping captives consumed provisions and invited pursuit. Damaging them could harden resistance in future captures. Reputation worked best when surrender remained survivable. In June, Queen Anne's Revenge entered the waters around Beaufort Inlet and grounded. Another vessel in the company also ran aground. The event is documented, the intention is not. One interpretation holds that Blackbeard deliberately reduced his company and concentrated shares by sacrificing the large ship. Another sees ordinary navigational failure in difficult water. The evidence does not settle the captain's thoughts. The very qualities that made the North Carolina coast useful could become dangerous. Shallow channels protected smaller vessels from heavy pursuit. A 200-ton flagship carried more draft and less room for error. Soundings, pilots, wind, tide, and shifting bottom all mattered. A hidden inlet was never obliged to cooperate with legend. Blackbeard moved on in smaller craft. He accepted the royal pardon under North Carolina authority and spent time near local officials and traders. He later returned to raiding. The pardon covered qualifying earlier acts, not an unlimited future career, and reports of renewed piracy created pressure from neighboring Virginia. Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood sent a force under Royal Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard into North Carolina waters. The jurisdiction was not neatly simple. Colonial rivalry, commerce, and concern about local tolerance shaped the decision. Suppression could involve one governor acting where another formally held authority, proving that the state side of the law was capable of its own flexible boundaries. Maynard's vessels reached Blackbeard near Ocracoke on the 22nd of November, 1718. Shallow water influenced the approach. The final action involved maneuver, concealment of men, and close fighting, but anatomical detail adds nothing to its meaning. Blackbeard was killed, and surviving crewmen were taken. The display of his remains later served official warning, a fact best left without lingering description. Ocracoke was the site of that final fight. Beaufort Inlet held the grounded flagship. Cape Fear, farther south, became central to Stede Bonnet's capture. Later retelling folds these into a single Carolina cove because three names demand more patience than one. Geography preserves the difference. The Beaufort wreck was discovered in November 1996. Early finds included cannon, anchors, a sounding weight, firearm remains, and a bronze bell dated 1705. The bell does does not bear the words Queen Anne's Revenge. Identification developed from location, artifact dates, site character, historical maps, armament, and documentary fit. It is cumulative and strong without being magical. That method suits the ship's layered life. No engraved name erases Locon Cord *. Cannon added or gathered under pirate command rest beside objects from trade and navigation. Food remains and storage pieces speak more quietly than weapons. Research into the captive voyage restores people whom the phrase Blackbeard's ship tends to hide. The famous captain occupied only a brief part of the vessel's history, and accepted crewmen occupied only part of its human world. Around them stood captives, forced workers, French sailors, suppliers, colonial buyers, and African communities. The articles that might restrain a pirate captain did not decide the status of everyone carried below or ordered to work above. Status could change at the moment of capture without becoming freedom. A merchant captain surrendered papers and keys. Skilled sailors might be asked or ordered to join. Passengers lost control of their property and movement. Enslaved people aboard a prize remained subject to decisions made by armed strangers. The pirate company sorted human beings as carefully as rope, medicine, and cargo, though the records preserve the process unevenly. The two famous flagships make the problem impossible to avoid. Wid a gal e** was built into Humphrey Morris's slave trading business before Bellamy captured it. La Concorde had completed repeated trafficking voyages before Blackbeard renamed it. Pirate seizure ended the authority of one captain and owner. It did not by itself end the Atlantic system that had placed captive Africans aboard. Pirates could attack a slave ship for its gold, provisions, hull, weapons, and captives without opposing slavery. Some black seamen appear in pirate crews. Some may have joined after capture. Some held maritime skills that a company valued. A few records suggest positions of authority or recognized participation. These facts matter, but they do not support a universal multiracial equality. Other records show pirates selling enslaved captives, treating them as disposable labor, abandoning them, or keeping them under coercion. Along the West African coast, pirate activity remained entangled with slave trading and local commerce. A company willing to share plunder among accepted members could still regard other people as property. The black flag did not cleanse the market beneath it. Historical interpretation has emphasized different parts of this record. Marcus Ridicker and others have drawn attention to resistance, class conflict, black participation, and forms of solidarity at sea. Arne Bialashewski has documented pirates' participation in slavery and challenged broad claims of a colorblind pirate world. The disagreement is not solved by choosing the most attractive ship. The evidence is too uneven for a safe percentage of black pirates, formerly enslaved pirates, or equal crew members. Trial records may identify color or status inconsistently. Ship lists are incomplete. A person described by a European recorder as a servant might understand his own position differently, while still facing the recorder's power. Later writers sometimes promoted every black person aboard into a free pirate, and sometimes erased them entirely. Careful language leaves room for what is unknown. A named man may have been aboard a pirate vessel. He may appear to have joined the crew. He may have served as a pilot, sailor, cook, or armed participant. Unless the evidence supports the step, was freed says too much. So does remained enslaved if the record shows recognized independent action. Uncertainty is not evasion when the archive itself is uncertain. Membership under pirate articles made practical differences. A recognized crewman could vote, receive a share, claim provisions, and appeal to agreed rules. A forced carpenter might perform essential work without any of those rights. A captive African might be armed for a particular action without gaining secure status. A servant might find a path into the company, or discover that the company had merely changed masters. Age and gender also shaped boundaries. Some articles reported by Johnson prohibited bringing women or boys aboard. Such clauses belong to particular attributed agreements and cannot define every ship. They do show male crews trying to regulate membership, sexual conflict, and perceived risk. Their existence does not explain every woman encountered at sea, or every relationship later imagined by biographers. Women were present in maritime economies as merchants, tavern keepers, family members, captives, passengers, workers, and defendants, even where shipboard employment excluded them. Anne Bonny and Mary Read became famous partly because the secure record of their active participation is unusual. Their later stories should not be used to make all pirate companies open institutions. Their trial belongs to a narrow and specific case. Indigenous people also appear too often as unnamed assistants in European adventures. Caribbean buccaneers relied at different times on indigenous pilots, paddlers, hunters, guides, food suppliers, and allies. Local knowledge could decide whether an expedition found water or crossed difficult ground. Communities negotiated alliance and exchange for their own reasons, rather than existing to help raiders complete a chapter. Those relationships also included capture, coercion, displacement, and violence. A pilot might be compelled. A settlement might trade in one season and resist in another. Rival groups could use European raiders within local conflict, while the raiders used local divisions in return. No single phrase, ally or victim, holds every encounter. Madagascar presents a similarly active shore. Pirate settlements dealt with Malagasy rulers and communities through trade, family ties, negotiation, enslavement, coercion, and conflict. Asian goods and coin entered these relationships. So did weapons and people. The fictional Libertalia replaced this difficult history with an orderly experiment in freedom, which was considerate of fiction, and less so of the evidence. Pirate ships depended on these coastal worlds because European crews did not possess all necessary knowledge. They needed food, water, labor, information, and political permission, whether explicit or temporary. Local people could profit from exchange, resist demands, redirect visitors, or become trapped by armed power. The coast was not a passive service station. Courtrooms later attempted their own sorting. Prosecutors distinguished organizers from men claiming compulsion. Witnesses described who carried weapons, accepted shares, issued orders, or tried to escape. Defendants emphasized capture and threats. Courts sometimes acquitted people while condemning others from the same broad company. The procedure recognized unequal participation, though it operated within imperial categories and severe penalties. A forced service defense could be especially difficult for someone already held under another form of unfreedom. European courts did not treat all testimony and status equally. Enslaved or formerly enslaved people might appear as property, labor, witnesses, or unnamed presence. The legal question of voluntary piracy did not automatically address the larger coercion that structured their lives. The sorting aboard and the sorting ashore reflected one another imperfectly. Pirates decided who belonged to the company. Courts decided who belonged among the guilty. Both relied on conduct, testimony, reputation, and interested accounts. A man could be accepted for a share at sea and call himself a captive at trial. Another could be excluded from shares, yet treated by prosecutors as part of the crew. This is why pirate democracy must remain a bounded claim. Some participating crewmen did use elections, shared provisions, compensation, and articles to protect themselves against arbitrary captains. That was real enough to matter. It existed inside a wider vessel containing people with fewer choices, and inside an oceanic economy built partly on enslavement. The legend prefers a single verdict. Pirates were either liberators beneath a flag or villains beyond society. The working record is less obedient. They could resist a merchant captain and then sell captives. They could welcome a skilled black sailor and exploit others. They could depend on indigenous pilots and raid indigenous communities. Their order redistributed power among some people without redistributing it to all. When authorities captured a company, these distinctions moved onto paper. Names were called, pleas entered, witnesses examined, and verdicts separated. At Charlestown, Stede Bonnet and his associates faced proceedings that preserved both condemnations and acquittals. The court did not reveal every private choice, but it left a sharper record than the broad moral flag later raised over them. The sharper record began with an unusual captain. Stede Bonnet, the Barbados landowner and militia major who had bought the sloop Revenge did not fit the familiar path from abused seaman to mutineer. His resources allowed him to hire men and enter piracy deliberately, whatever private motive lay behind the choice. The later explanation that an unhappy marriage sent him to sea is tidy, memorable, and poorly supported. Bonnet's command was not consistently successful. He became associated with Blackbeard, the captain who would soon lose Queen Anne's revenge at Beaufort Inlet. Later accounts describe an awkward relationship in which Blackbeard took effective control while Bonnet remained aboard. Exact conversations belong to uncertain narration, but the larger association and Bonnet's difficulty in command are well established enough to shape his career. After the royal pardon became available, Bonnet sought legal shelter. He later returned to raiding under the name Captain Edwards. A changed name did not alter the acts observed by merchants and officials. Near Cape Fear, his company met an armed force in the river approaches. Groundings and channels influenced the engagement, as they so often did along that coast. Bonnet was captured after resistance and taken to Charlestown. He escaped custody and was recaptured. The brief escape added another useful scene for later biography, but the trial record matters more. Vice Admiralty proceedings at Charlestown ran from the 28th of October through the 12th of November, 1718. The printed account appeared in London the following year and preserved charges, testimony, pleas, names, and verdicts. Across the associated trials, the printed record named 30 condemned defendants and 4 acquitted. The imbalance shows the court's suppressive force. The acquittals show that appearance before it did not produce one automatic result. Commissioners heard evidence intended to distinguish active pirates from men whose participation was not proved to the required standard. Defendants had reason to emphasize coercion. Witnesses had reason to assist the prosecution, especially if cooperation protected them. Accomplice testimony could illuminate a voyage and redirect blame. The printed proceeding frames these exchanges through official categories and does not recover every pressure in the room. It still gives more secure ground than an invented final speech. Bonnet was convicted and executed in December. The legal end should not be enlarged into spectacle. Its importance lies in the reach of a colonial admiralty process, the preservation of named outcomes, and the way one wealthy entrant was judged under the same piracy law that reached ordinary seamen. Social position had opened his unusual path to a ship, but did not provide a final exit. The pardon, capture, trial, and sentence at Charlestown formed one part of a widening system. In Jamaica, another company produced 2 of the most famous and least securely biographed defendants. Jack Rackham had risen after the reported deposition of Charles Vane, an episode known chiefly through Johnson. Rackham's company was captured in 1720 and taken to trial at St. Jago de la Vega. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were tried separately from Rackham and several male defendants on the 28th of November. The Jamaica pamphlet establishes their presence with the company through witness testimony. Dorothy Thomas identified them as women and described their active conduct. That recognition complicates the later claim that both maintained a complete male disguise throughout their pirating careers. The trial supports participation, conviction, and the fact that each woman declared pregnancy, resulting in a stay of sentence. it does not securely support most of the biographies attached later. Childhood disguises, military adventures, private duels, romantic arrangements, or polished farewell lines. Documentary narrowness is not a blank permission slip, though generations of writers have treated it with enthusiasm. Mary Read died in custody in 1721, according to the parish record used by later scholars. Anne Bonny's fate after the pregnancy stay is not securely established. Proposed marriages, children, release through family influence, and precise death dates remain speculation. The missing conclusion helped later culture supply several. Their case reveals how a trial can be both firm and limited. It fixes a place, date, charge, witnesses, verdict, and plea. It offers glimpses of conduct. It does not reconstruct an entire childhood or private relationship. The source closest to the event is less complete than the legend, which is exactly why the legend grew so comfortably around it. While courts in the Caribbean and North America processed captured crews, piracy shifted toward wider Atlantic and West African routes. Bartholomew Roberts's company moved repeatedly across the ocean, attacking shipping from Newfoundland and the Caribbean to the African coast. Period-based estimates credit him with well over 400 captures, but the total is not an audited ledger and should remain an estimate. Roberts's scale made him a different suppression problem. A large, mobile company could divide among vessels, gather information, and take many merchant ships. It also required provisions, discipline, and places to trade. As havens narrowed and naval pursuit became more sustained, size created exposure as well as strength. Captain Chal Unner O'Goul commanded the Royal Navy ship Swallow in the campaign against Roberts. Near Cape Lopez, Ogle used scouting, naval discipline, and tactical deception to separate pirate vessels and approach the company. On the 10th of February, 1722, Roberts was killed during the action. The event can be understood through divided ships and command decisions without following later writers into bodily detail. The naval victory continued ashore. Proceedings at Cape Coast produced 52 death sentences among Roberts's crew. The number demonstrated state capacity far from London. Naval capture, secure detention, admiralty judgment, and public punishment combined in one operation. It was intended to communicate that the African coast no longer offered an easy refuge beyond enforcement. Roberts's defeat did not end piracy everywhere. Smaller attacks continued, and maritime robbery did not vanish with the period later called Golden. The campaign damaged a large network and displayed a changing balance. Pirates faced fewer tolerant havens, more cautious buyers, local trial commissions, informants, pardons, and naval ships able to remain on station. Suppression worked cumulatively. New Providence became governed. Merchants faced pressure not to receive stolen goods. Former pirates supplied intelligence. Printed rewards encouraged betrayal. Colonial courts reduced the need to send defendants to England. Naval patrols made repair and resale harder. Public sentences raised the expected cost. No single battle closed the age, but each lost harbor and prosecuted company narrowed the room in which large crews could operate. The three court settings also revealed different kinds of memory. Bonnets preceding preserved condemned and acquitted names. The Jamaica pamphlet fixed a narrow record around Bonny and Reed. The Roberts Archive joined Admiralty files with a celebrated naval campaign. Printers then drew from such material, mixed it with news and invention, and arranged captains into a cast. Once set in type, uncertainty gained grammar and dialogue. A defendant's incomplete testimony could become a full motive. A disputed vote could become a scene. A missing life could acquire childhood, romance, and final words. The pirate hunter had removed a company from the sea. The printer was about to return it in a form much harder to suppress. The printer worked with fragments that did not naturally form a life. A trial supplied a name and plea. A newspaper supplied a capture. A governor's letter supplied an accusation. A survivor supplied a story shaped by self-protection. Between those pieces lay empty years and private conversations. Commercial biography had little affection for an empty space. Pirate history had entered print long before the famous collection of the 1720s. Al X Andra Olive Eix, Quemelin's Dutch account, appeared in 1678 and became foundational to the buccaneer image. It carried first-hand proximity and valuable detail, but every edition traveled through language, politics, and publishing. Translations altered emphasis. National audiences received different villains and heroes. Henry Morgan's successful objection to his treatment in an English version shows that publication had consequences in its own time. Morgan was no longer merely a raider in a distant campaign. He held status within Jamaica's governing world. A printed accusation could injure reputation and invite legal response. Exquemelin's book was evidence, grievance, and product at once. Trial pamphlets looked more official. The proceeding against William Kidd included indictments and his commissions. The Bonnet volume named convicted and acquitted defendants. The Jamaica record placed Bonny and Reed before witnesses. Such publications preserve material close to events, but they are not transparent windows. Courts selected charges and questions. Printers compressed speech. Institutional purpose shaped the page. Official origin can make a text firmer without making it neutral. Prosecutors wanted to establish piracy. Defendants wanted to avoid conviction. Accomplices might redirect blame. Commissioners used legal categories that did not capture every social relation aboard. A printed trial remains indispensable precisely because its limits can be compared with other records. In 1724, a book appeared under the name Captain Charles Johnson. Asterisk, a general history of the robberies and murders of the most notorious pirates. Its title promised notoriety rather than administrative restraint. It gathered captains into biographies, supplied vivid scenes, reproduced or presented articles, described flags, and gave memorable speeches to people who had not left reliable transcripts. The book did not simply invent everything. It used genuine records, news, testimony, and circulating reports. Some details can be confirmed elsewhere, others cannot. Some appear shaped into moral or political episodes. Its usefulness changes claim by claim. It is strong evidence for what readers were told in the 1720s, and variable evidence for what happened aboard a particular vessel. There is no single stable text called Johnson's History. Editions changed between 1724 and 1734. Material was added, rearranged, and altered. Later readers often quote an episode without asking which edition carried it, or whether the episode appeared near the first publication. A book that seems to fix pirate lives was itself moving. The author's identity remains unsettled. Daniel Defoe was once widely credited, but external proof is lacking, and scholars challenged the attribution. Arne Bialashewski proposed journalist and printer Nathaniel Mist as a more likely author. The proposal is an argument, not a discovered signature. The safest author remains the anonymous writer, using the name Captain Charles Johnson. Unknown authorship does not make source criticism impossible. Vocabulary, publishing history, borrowed documents, changes between editions, and comparison with contemporary records all reveal method. The question is not merely who held the pen. It is how the book turned scattered maritime news into durable character. Bellamy received the eloquent critique of rich, lawful men. The speech makes his company resemble principled social opposition. Whether based on rumor, shaped report, or invention, it fits a literary role. The secure ship and trial evidence can show capture, organization, coercion claims, and wreck. It cannot verify the speech's exact words. Vane's deposition after refusing combat gave pirate articles a dramatic test. Rackham's elevation turned governance into a scene with recognizable personalities. The broad event may reflect real crew practice. Johnson's staging provides detail that independent evidence does not fully secure. Attribution allows the story to be used without pretending the narrator stood beside the vote. Bonney and Reed offered even more open space. The trial securely established active presence, conviction, and pregnancy pleas. Johnson and later retellings supplied early disguises, romance, duels, courage speeches, and final exchanges. Some elements may contain lost reports. None gain certainty merely because it makes a better story than documentary silence. Henry Every's disappearance invited a complete alternative life. Later fiction connected him with a Moo Gull princess and royal destiny. The transformation removed the perspective of Sue Rot and the Hadge passengers while rewarding the English attacker with romance. A missing body and missing retirement were excellent raw materials for success fantasy. Flags changed under print as well. Period accounts mention black and red colors, skeletons, hearts, weapons, hourglasses, and human figures, but very few flags survive. Textual descriptions were later converted into precise images assigned to famous captains. Once drawn repeatedly, an uncertain design began to look like an artifact. Blackbeard's familiar horned figure is a clear example of modern confidence outrunning direct evidence. Even the phrase Jolly Roger resists one clean origin. A proposed link to the French words asterisk, Jo li rouge asterisk, competes with an association with Old Roger, a name for the devil. The etymology remains unresolved. A good pirate legend naturally prefers one answer, preferably one that can be said with a theatrical accent. The archive declines to assist. Printed articles require the same care. Johnson's sets attributed to Roberts and other crews shaped modern accounts of voting, lights, gambling, compensation, weapons, and shares. They may preserve substantial genuine practice. They do not establish a single code. Comparison with Esquemelin, privateering contracts, maritime custom, and trial testimony shows both recurring needs and differing terms. Source criticism does not drain the subject of life. It changes the life being followed. A typesetter adds a paragraph. A later addition moves a story. A trial omits context. A governor chooses a legal label. A 19th century illustrator gives vague symbols exact outlines. These are actions with consequences, even if they occur quietly at a desk. The process also explains why certain people dominate memory. A captain with a strong literary scene survives better than an unnamed pilot. A dramatic execution survives better than a season of hull repair. A chest of coin survives better than a cargo of cloth. The archive and the market both select, though by different rules. Other evidence can challenge those selections. Parish entries can close one narrow question, as with Mary Read's death in custody. Merchant papers can restore a ship's slave-trading origin. Mughal chronicles can shift an attack away from its English captain. Archaeology can return tools, storage pieces, ballast, and food remains to a story crowded by speeches. The objects do not speak without interpretation. Their setting can be disturbed. Salvage can remove context. Identification can become entangled with publicity. Yet a cannon's manufacture, a hull's timber, or an inscription on a bell does not need Johnson to remember it. Beneath sand and marine growth, the printed cast gives way to vessels with several lives and evidence that accumulates one measured fragment at a time. The first fragment might be almost too persuasive. A bell recovered from the asterisk Wida asterisk site carried the vessel's name and a date, giving archaeologists an unusually direct line from object to ship. It did not identify every person aboard or explain Bellamy's command. It answered the narrower question with uncommon firmness. This wreck belonged to the named vessel. The work around that answer remained complicated. The site had been investigated through a private salvage and museum enterprise, where archaeological recovery existed beside commercial publicity. Claims about treasure could travel faster than context. An artifact inventory, location record, conservation history, and comparison with trial and merchant documents provides steadier ground than a promoted total of riches. Objects recovered from a wreck are not a collection assembled for a modern argument. Heavy material survives differently from cloth and paper. Storm and surf move things. Wood decays. Iron gathers thick marine concretions. Earlier salvage and later disturbance alter positions. Archaeologists reconstruct a site from what remains, not from a complete room politely sealed on the day of loss. At Beaufort Inlet, no bell named Queen Anne's Revenge *. The wreck was discovered on the 21st of November, 1996. Initial finds included cannon, anchors, a sounding weight, firearm material, and a bronze bell bearing the date 1705. That date fit the possible ship, but it did not name it. Identification developed cumulatively. Location matched the documented grounding area. Artifact dates fit a vessel lost in 1718. Historical maps and written accounts placed Blackbeard's large ship in the inlet. The number and variety of cannon suggested an unusually armed site. The arrangement and character of the wreck fit the expected vessel. No single object carried the burden. Agreement among many pieces made the case persuasive. The site entered the National Register of Historic Places, and the state project has reported the recovery of more than 400,000 artifacts. The large figure does not mean 400,000 diagnostic pirate possessions. A fragment, fastener, shot, or piece of concreted material may receive individual treatment. Quantity reflects conservation labor and the complexity of the site more readily than a hoard. The cannon demonstrate that the vessel carried heavy and mixed armament. They do not establish the exact number aboard on every day of its career. Shot, firearm components, and grenade remains reveal preparation and available force without reconstructing a particular wound or attack. The absence of complete bladed weapons in the published count gently corrects the later dominance of the cutlass. Navigation and work tools tell a slower story. A sounding weight belongs to repeated caution in shallow water, even though caution did not prevent the final grounding. Dividers and a sector belong to calculation. Scale and coin weights connect measurement with commerce. Surveying pieces, needles, grindstones, carpentry equipment, and gunnery tools show trained labor distributed through the ship. Medical and food remains return the body without spectacle. A mortar and pestle suggest preparation of compounds. Containers held drink, water, or stores. Barrel hoops mark storage after staves decayed. Animal bones record meals. Pewter pieces carry the ambiguity of use and cargo. Fabric impressions on some pewter suggest that plates may have been packed for transport rather than set before Blackbeard's crew. That ambiguity is valuable. The wreck had once been La Concorde *. It carried French commercial equipment and material from a trafficking voyage before pirate capture. Some objects may have belonged to cargo, captive transport, ordinary seamanship, or the French crew. Others may reflect Blackbeard's enlargement of armament and later use. Calling the site a pirate wreck describes its final command, not the origin of every piece. Ongoing archival work can alter interpretation without moving an object. The discovery of an insurance claim connected with *La Concorde* adds information about the business and the captive Africans forced aboard. Early public reporting does not yet justify a complete account of each person's fate. Archaeology and documents advance at different speeds, and restraint is part of the method. The wreck identified as *Key da Merchant*, presents another route to certainty. The vessel, an Armenian-owned prize taken by William Kidd, was located off the Dominican Republic and confirmed through archaeological and documentary work in 2010. Hull construction, wood, ballast, site location, and historical evidence converged. The site has been preserved in place as an underwater museum rather than stripped for an imagined chest. Ballast can be eloquent in this setting. Stones selected to stabilize a vessel may connect with geology and route. Hull fastenings and construction reveal building traditions. Distribution on the seabed helps explain wreck formation. None is glamorous enough to appear on a treasure map, which is precisely why it can correct a story organized around treasure. The three sites demonstrate different forms of identification. *Wida* has the inscribed bell. Beaufort has a strong cumulative case without a named object. *Key da Merchant* joins hull and ballast evidence to global documentary context. There is no need to declare one the only authenticated pirate wreck. Authentication depends on the nature and convergence of evidence. Archaeology can answer questions that printed biography barely notices. It can reveal vessel size, construction, repair, storage, food traces, armament range, navigation tools, and the environment of loss. It can test whether a site fits the date and place given in records. It can expose how many kinds of work existed beneath the name of one captain. It cannot recover a vote directly. No artifact states whether a grounding was deliberate. A weapon does not identify a volunteer. A shared bowl does not prove equality. A large cannon does not prove courage. A captain's personality leaves no reliable sediment layer. Those questions require documents and argument, and some remain unresolved. Conservation makes the pace of this evidence visible. A concreted mass may require imaging and patient removal before its contents are known. Wood must be stabilized after leaving water. Iron can deteriorate rapidly in air without treatment. Measurements and records accompany each step. The dramatic instant of discovery gives way to years of quiet work. That work can also challenge the fame attached to a site. Researchers studying the captive voyage of *La Concorde* recover people obscured by Blackbeard's name. Merchant links around *Wida* return Humphrey Morris and Atlantic slavery to Bellamy's story. Global materials around *Key da Merchant* connect Armenian ownership, Indian Ocean trade, Caribbean movement, and English law. The surviving object is therefore not a pure relic of pirate culture. It may have been made in one country, sold in another, packed as cargo, used under several captains, and lost during a brief final phase. Its history resembles the ship's history, layered, mobile, and resistant to one label. At the *Key da Merchant * site, those layers point back toward Kidd's disputed capture. Hull and ballast confirm the vessel that became central to his legal defense, but they cannot decide whether his commission made the taking lawful. That question remained among papers, flags, and courtroom judgment. Nearby in the larger story lay the only famous cache that authorities actually recovered, a temporary deposit on an island with no coded map. The island deposit began with a captain who possessed unusually impressive papers. William Kidd sailed with royal and admiralty commissions connected to powerful investors. His voyage was intended to pursue specified pirates and lawful enemy prizes. This origin placed him inside state-sponsored anti-piracy and privateering, not outside law from the first morning. The commissions were limited instruments. They did not guarantee that every later capture would be approved. Kidd still had to identify permitted targets, respect the legal status of shipping, and account for prizes. His voyage suffered from delay, pressure, crew conflict, and the difficulty of finding targets that satisfied both law and investors. A document under seal could authorize a venture without making the ocean cooperate. The *Key da Merchant * became the central problem. The vessel was Armenian-owned and carried documentation connected with the French. Kidd treated its papers and flag status as support for a lawful capture. Prosecutors treated the taking as piracy. The exact handling and force of the French-connected papers have remained part of historical dispute. The case cannot be reduced safely to one missing page and one villain hiding it. Kidd left his original adventure galley * behind as the captured merchant became more important. That transfer resembled the practical ship choices made by other companies, but his commissions and investors gave it a distinct legal frame. He was not merely selecting a better hull. He was carrying contested property into a political system increasingly unwilling to accept his judgment. On returning to the Western Atlantic, Kidd learned that he was wanted. He attempted to negotiate surrender and believed his patrons or papers might protect him. Before giving himself up, he left valuables on Gare d'Honneurs Island near Long Island. The deposit was real. Authorities recovered it. That simple sequence contains the seed of generations of treasure hunting. Kidd temporarily concealed valuable property while trying to manage arrest and negotiation. He did not leave it for a distant future. He did not vanish after drawing a coded map. The cache was found by officials within the unfolding case. Its purpose was practical and immediate. Kidd surrendered and was sent to England. At the Old Bailey in May 1701, he faced 6 indictments involving murder and piracy. The printed proceeding included his commissions, preserving the awkward fact that the condemned man had begun with government authority. His defense and the prosecution argued over acts that had moved across legal categories and several oceans. He was convicted and executed on the 23rd of May. Political patronage, evidentiary handling, crew testimony, and the disputed prize have sustained debate. Declaring Kidd wholly innocent erases serious conduct and the court's case. Calling him an ordinary pirate erases the commissions and unstable legal boundary that made his voyage possible. His enduring position lies between those convenient verdicts. The recovered island valuables gave later treasure seekers one firm fact and ample room to ignore its limits. If Kidd had hidden one deposit, perhaps he had hidden others. Coastlines from New York through New England accumulated rumors. Islands, unusual rocks, old trees, and unreadable marks became clues. A recovered cache grew into a landscape of missing caches, because absence is difficult to disprove and pleasant to search. Actual pirate commerce made routine burial unlikely. Crews needed provisions, repairs, drink, clothing, weapons, and payment. Cargo could spoil. Cloth, sugar, and other bulky goods were sold or consumed. Coin was divisible and portable, which made carrying or spending it more sensible than abandoning it under soil. Mobile companies did not know when they could safely return to one shore. Temporary concealment remained possible, as Kidd proved. A crew might hide goods from authorities, rivals, or one another. That is different from a standard custom of burying chests for heirs equipped with a puzzle. No verified Golden Age practice in the research establishes routine X-marked treasure maps. The map belongs mainly to the afterlife. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island *, published in 1883, gave that afterlife an extraordinary shape. The novel gathered a marked map, buried wealth, a one-legged seaman, a parrot, remembered pirate song, and an island expedition into one durable package. It did not claim to be an admiralty record. Its success made fiction feel older than the evidence. Later theater and film added familiar speech, clothing, punishments, and flags. Walking the plank became standard, even though it is not a routine Golden Age practice in the sources considered here. Parrots and peg legs became occupational equipment. A regional stage voice became the sound of every ocean. The legend achieved what pirate articles never did: universal standardization. Some parts of the package retain a distant historical root. Sailors could lose limbs. Ships carried animals. Crews used flags and frightening symbols. Pirates concealed goods on occasion. Disabled seamen lived in maritime communities. Fiction selected plausible fragments and arranged them into a system more coherent than ordinary life. The real system was coherent in a different way. Pirate companies needed skilled labor, seaworthy hulls, provisions, intelligence, markets, and political gaps. Some used articles and elections among accepted members. Some cultivated fear to prevent resistance. They took remarkable prizes and a great many unremarkable stores. Governments answered with pardons, local courts, informants, patrols, and pressure on buyers. The proportions changed in memory. Every's exceptional Moo Gull prize became the expected chest. Kids' recovered temporary cash became routine burial. Varied ship-specific rules became the pirate code. Limited voting became universal democracy. Sparse descriptions became exact personal flags. Johnson's unstable printed biographies became private diaries of the dead. The correction need not replace adventure with a ledger. The working world has its own quiet mystery. A commission can change meaning while a ship is still at sea. A bell can name one wreck while another requires thousands of converging fragments. A trial can preserve a woman's conviction and lose the rest of her life. A sounding weight can survive the grounding it failed to prevent. Uncertainty is part of that world. Henry Every disappears after provoking an imperial crisis. Anne Bonny leaves the secure record after her pregnancy plea. Blackbeard's exact flag remains elusive. The intention behind the Beaufort grounding cannot be lifted from the seabed. Captain Johnson keeps an assumed name. These are not invitations to fill every gap. They are the surviving edges of evidence. The calmest objects resist the famous pose. Barrel hoops record water and food. Fabric impressions remain on packed pewter. Ballast holds a hull steady and later helps identify it. Dividers speak of distance. Mortars speak of illness. Trial pages list people whose stories did not become novels. Their value lies in not pretending to be treasure. Kids' Island cash was recovered, divided by authority rather than discovered through a riddle. The asterisk key da merchant asterisk rests within a wider archaeological and historical setting. Between the deposit and the wreck-like commissions, disputed papers, commerce, ambition, and a court's verdict. The map added later draws a cleaner route because fiction is not troubled by prize jurisdiction. Beyond that fictional X, the old maritime world settles into less dramatic marks. A date on an unnamed bell, a ship's name on another, a line of testimony, a worn tool, a channel measured before entering. They do not offer one final pirate truth. They offer enough depth to continue without running aground. And then the quiet water beyond the mark. The quiet water beyond the mark still led back to shore. A prize that survived capture carried more than whatever lay in its hold. It carried papers naming owners, ports, cargo, and route. It carried sailors who could testify. It carried a hull that needed anchorage and goods that needed buyers. Those ordinary burdens linked robbery at sea with law and commerce on land, where the golden age was finally narrowed. Imagine no single famous captain, only a merchant vessel stopped somewhere along a busy route. The pursuing craft shows friendly colors at first because surprise is cheaper than a damaged prize. Distance closes. The false flag descends and another signal rises. Period reports describe black and red pirate flags, sometimes with figures of death, weapons, hearts, or hourglasses. Practice varied, and very few actual pieces of cloth remain. Black often communicated a chance of quarter, while red could warn that resistance would receive none. But this was not a universal international code enforced by a flag office. Colors gained meaning through context and reputation. A merchant master considered the attacking vessel's speed, guns, crew, and name. He also considered his own cargo, passengers, weapons, and chance of escape. Surrender could preserve lives and property not yet removed. For the pirates, intimidation served careful arithmetic. Cannon fire consumed powder and shot. Damage reduced the value of both vessels. Injured specialists could not easily be replaced. A merchant crew that struck its colors might reveal hidden valuables, shoals, or recent news. Reputation did the work of iron at a useful discount. The exact design mattered less than the message at the time. Later illustrators reversed that priority. A vague report of a skeleton or weapon became a precise personal emblem. Captains received standardized flags as if each had filed a trademark. The surviving evidence is better for the logic of signaling than for a complete catalog of designs. Even the name Jolly Roger entered uncertainly. One suggested origin connects it to the French phrase asterisk, Jolie Rouge asterisk, while another connects Old Roger with the devil. Neither explanation has closed the matter. The unresolved origin belongs comfortably beside fabric that rarely survived and descriptions copied through print. Once the merchant vessel surrendered, movement replaced symbols. Boats crossed between hulls. Papers were collected. Crewmen searched stores and questioned officers. The attackers wanted cargo information, but they also wanted water, medicine, sailcloth, rope, carpentry supplies, weapons, navigation instruments, and news. A captain who concealed a valuable chest could bring harsher treatment, while a truthful inventory might shorten the encounter. Evidence does not support one standard boarding ritual. Some prizes were released after useful material was removed. Some were burned or abandoned. Some joined the company temporarily. A fast or better armed vessel could replace the pirate's existing ship. Sailors with needed skills might be pressured to join. Other people were left with a damaged craft and fewer provisions, expected to find a port without the tools just taken from them. The cargo then presented the old problem of weight. Coin divided easily. Cloth did not. Sugar, food, drink, timber, and spare rigging occupied room. Enslaved captives could be treated as saleable property, coerced labor, unwanted responsibility, or potential recruits under uncertain conditions. Each choice depended on markets and the company's immediate needs. Pirates did not usually sail toward an isolated island to admire the division. They sought contact. A merchant willing to receive goods could offer far less than lawful value because the seller lacked legal recourse. The discount compensated for risk while giving the merchant an unusual margin. Stolen cloth became cloth in a warehouse. A barrel became a barrel on another ship. Commerce washed labels more effectively than seawater. Receiving pirate goods was therefore central to suppression law. Officials understood that robbery could not remain profitable without fences, suppliers, and protectors. The piracy statute reached people who knowingly aided pirates or handled their property. Enforcement remained difficult because intent had to be shown, records could be vague, and colonial relationships protected profitable exchange. A governor might lack troops or a reliable ship, while local merchants controlled credit. An official willing to confront pirates could find that neighbors preferred the trade. Another official might condemn piracy publicly and tolerate associates who benefited from it. Imperial orders traveled slowly, but a captured cargo could enter local accounts at once. North American merchants participated in networks connected with Madagascar and Asian goods. Ships and intermediaries linked oceans that pirate legend keeps in separate chapters. Coin and textiles taken in the Indian Ocean could move through island settlements and Atlantic commerce. Provisions and weapons traveled back toward the cruising grounds. Piracy depended on this exchange rather than operating as a complete rebellion against trade. The business left traces beyond dramatic trials. Merchants wrote letters. Owners filed claims. Governors sent complaints. Customs officers recorded arrivals. Insurers and investors tried to place losses. Sailors petitioned for wages or relief. A suspected prize could carry papers in several languages, each attached to a different commercial interest. Legal identity became a stack rather than a single flag. Prize adjudication under a lawful commission made those papers essential. A privateer was supposed to bring a capture before a competent court. The court considered whether the target belonged to a permitted enemy and whether the seizure complied with the commission. Owners and interested merchants could challenge condemnation. Only after judgment did the captors possess the clean legal claim they wanted. Pirates avoided that process or tried to shelter behind doubtful authority. The statute addressed attacks made under color of a foreign commission, especially where such paper was used against the king's subjects. A commission from somewhere did not automatically command recognition everywhere. Sovereignty had to accept the issuer and the act. The overseas court system made the answer more portable. Before the law expanded procedure, sending defendants and witnesses to England created delay, expense, escape risk, and lost testimony. The act conventionally dated 1698 authorized commissions for admiralty trials in colonies and other distant places. Proceedings could take place on land or aboard an appropriate ship. At least 7 qualified commissioners formed the panel described by the statute. They heard witnesses and voted on judgment. This was not the ordinary English common law jury familiar from many land trials. Admiralty procedure was adapted to maritime jurisdiction and imperial distance. Its form reminds us that saying a pirate was tried by the law still leaves the important question of which court and under what authority. The statute gathered several kinds of conduct around piracy: making revolt, running away with a vessel, corrupting the crew, aiding pirates, receiving goods, and abusing foreign commissions all entered its reach. Officials were describing a system. Ship seizure supplied the platform, recruits supplied labor, merchants supplied value, and legal disguise supplied delay. Suppression had to interrupt more than boarding. Witnesses remained necessary. A ship did not arrive at court carrying its own interpretation. Captured sailors identified officers and described acts. Merchant crews recounted pursuit, flags, words, and property taken. Defendants explained coercion or lawful authority. Commissioners judged testimony shaped by danger and self-interest. Printed proceedings made selected parts of this process public. They named defendants, summarized indictments, preserved some exchanges, and announced verdicts. Printers could sell official drama while governments displayed enforcement. The page extended a sentence beyond the harbor and warned readers that distant seas were no longer beyond court. Public punishment performed the same communication more harshly. Executions and the display of remains near ports were intended to make state authority visible at the point where sailors entered and left. The physical details need no repetition. The political message is enough. Law claimed the shoreline and used condemned bodies as signs. Later fiction enlarged other punishments that have weak support as routine Golden Age practice. Walking the plank became nearly compulsory in theatrical piracy, perhaps because a narrow board required less legal paperwork. The sources used here do not establish it as a standard custom. Keel hauling, likewise, should not be assigned generally to pirate crews without a specific contemporary case. Marooning has firmer roots in maritime discipline and pirate accounts. Leaving a person ashore removed a disruptive member without maintaining a prisoner aboard. Conditions varied with place, provisions, and chance of rescue. Even here, a named event requires a named source. The legend's universal ritual often begins where scattered practices are made identical. Shipboard articles listed penalties because internal order needed more than goodwill. Concealed plunder, desertion, neglected arms, or serious disputes threatened the company. Reported punishments could be severe. Their purpose inside the agreement was deterrence and enforcement among members. They did not turn every lurid punishment later attached to pirates into history. The state's punishments and the pirates' punishments shared one practical aim: making examples. Each authority wanted future behavior changed. The difference was recognition and reach. A pirate quartermaster could enforce terms while the company remained together. An admiralty court drew power from government, naval capture, prison, and print. The royal pardon inserted a gentler example. Surrender by the deadline showed that leaving piracy was possible. Rewards showed that helping capture former companions could pay. Trial showed what followed refusal. These measures worked together. Mercy without force might be ignored, while force without an exit could keep desperate companies united. Information tied the measures together. A pardoned pirate knew anchorages, vessel habits, and associates. Merchants knew who offered goods cheaply. Captured sailors knew officers. Governors exchanged reports, even while disagreeing over jurisdiction. Naval commanders learned routes and tactics. As information accumulated, the uncertainty that had protected large companies began to shrink. Sustained naval presence mattered more than an occasional expedition. A warship that remained on station could escort commerce, pursue reports, and deny repair time. Pirate vessels might outrun a heavier ship in favorable water, but they could not remain indefinitely without food and maintenance. Patrol pressure became market pressure when buyers feared scrutiny and suppliers reconsidered credit. Fortification altered havens in a similar way. Guns at a harbor entrance changed who could anchor openly. Soldiers and courts changed the cost of trading. Repairs to government buildings sound less dramatic than pursuit, but administration needed rooms, records, pay, and storage. Woodes Raj Erz's New Providence mission worked because authority arrived as a collection of material supports rather than an announcement alone. Colonial rivalry could disrupt this growth. Spotswood's Virginia force entered North Carolina waters to pursue Blackbeard under questionable jurisdictional simplicity. One government might accuse another of toleration. Merchants in one port could profit from policies condemned in another. State building was cumulative because it was also untidy. The great companies became harder to sustain as these gaps narrowed. A small crew could still rob an isolated vessel. Piracy in other regions and later periods continued. What declined was the particular Anglo-American system that allowed large companies to cruise, gather in havens, sell prizes, and move between weak jurisdictions with relative confidence. The end of the Golden Age is therefore not one date. Roughly, the 1720s provide a conventional closing frame because major campaigns, trials, and the loss of havens changed the scale. The label remains a historian's convenience. Sailors living through the change experienced closed markets, captured associates, altered patrols, and fewer safe repairs rather than the final page of an age. Ordinary pirate labor could flow back into ordinary maritime labor after pardon. A skilled seaman remained able to steer, splice, sound, load cargo, or repair a hull. Some men disappeared into ports under names that records cannot follow. Others testified, entered privateering in later wars, or returned to merchant work. A legal category could end, while a working life continued. That quiet return is difficult to document. Courts preserve defendants better than men who accepted a pardon and behaved without further notice. Newspapers prefer a capture to a season of coastal shipping. A sailor who successfully became uninteresting left the smallest biography. Suppression created silence as well as trial records. Families and port communities absorbed the aftermath. Wages, debts, missing men, confiscated goods, and disputed ownership outlasted a voyage. A vessel owner sought compensation. A widow or parent might petition. Merchants adjusted routes and insurance. Officials argued over costs. The celebrated captain occupies the center of legend, while these quieter consequences spread through account books. Ships themselves returned to commerce when released or recaptured. Others were condemned and sold. Some decayed in anchorages. Wrecks became hazards, salvage sites, or forgotten seabed until later investigation. A name could transfer to a new vessel, while the old hull lost its visible identity. Maritime memory was always subject to reuse. The pirates' dependence on ordinary society made complete disappearance impossible in another sense. Their tools were merchant tools. Their charts, casks, cannon, sails, and medicines came from the same workshops and markets. Their articles borrowed from familiar contracts and customs. Their goods returned to lawful trade. Their trials used imperial institutions built for a broader maritime world. The difference lay in authority and distribution, but even those shifted from case to case. A privateer divided lawful prize under a commission. A pirate company divided unauthorized prize under its articles. A merchant owner claimed both were thieves when his ship was taken. A court decided which papers and sovereign relationships it recognized. The legal boundary was unstable without being imaginary. This instability explains the attention paid to Captain Kidd long after less ambiguous robbers faded. His commissions, investors, disputed prize, surrender, and trial kept both sides of the boundary visible. The recovered Gar Dun Nur's Eilund deposit added physical proof that could be detached from its short-term purpose. Law supplied complexity. Folklore retained the buried valuables. It also explains why Henry Every's case caused more than a manhunt. His attack damaged English commercial standing inside Mughal sovereignty. The East India Company could insist he acted without authority, but Surat judged English power through the conduct, and control it observed. Private action became public consequence because oceanic trade had no sealed compartments. The unnamed merchants who bought pirate goods created the reverse movement. Public consequence became private profit. A government might denounce a captain, while colonial consumers used the cargo. The working world behind piracy included respectable people whose names rarely joined the notorious cast. The black flag was easier to condemn than a favorable invoice. Printed history helped keep those roles uneven. A biography follows a captain more naturally than a bale of cloth through intermediaries. A courtroom scene has speakers, while a price discount in a warehouse offers less dialogue. Yet the discount may explain survival better than the captain's most quoted speech. Archaeology restores part of that commercial scale. Coin weights and measuring tools point toward exchange. Pewter packed in fabric may be merchandise rather than tableware. Barrel hoops mark storage. Ballast reveals route and construction. A wreck assemblage contains cargo and equipment acquired before, during, and after changes of command. Conservation records add another layer of paperwork to the story. Each recovered object receives measurements, material descriptions, location, treatment history, and comparison. The careful modern file answers the pirate book's confident character scene with a slower kind of knowledge. Neither is free of interpretation, but only one can state exactly where a sounding weight lay. Source comparison works in the same patient way. A trial name is checked against a parish entry. A newspaper date is compared with a governor's letter. A French deposition is placed beside a wreck assemblage. A Persian chronicle changes the perspective of an English pirate account. Agreement strengthens a claim. Contradiction identifies a problem, rather than demanding an immediate winner. Spelling deserves similar calm. Thatch, and teach may point to the same famous captain without revealing which form he privately preferred. Every and Avery travel through records and later use. Rackham and Rackham differ by a letter and by editorial choice. Standardized modern names make searching easier, while sometimes concealing how unstable identification could be. Names of places also shift across language and time. A port can be known through European spelling, local usage, or a ship name derived from it. Asterisk wid a gal e asterisk, and the West African port, represented by we, do not need identical modern English pronunciation, merely because their written histories touch. Pronunciation, like spelling, carries roots of transmission. The work of recovering these forms does not produce one final catalog. New documents appear. Sites are re-examined. Old attributions weaken. The insurance material connected with asterisk la concord asterisk promises information while requiring restraint until detailed findings are available. A responsible account can change without pretending its earlier uncertainty was failure. Pirate legend changes too, though with fewer conservation forms. Each generation selects what it wants: rebellion, greed, costume, romance, democracy, danger, or escape. The historical record can correct false proportions without expecting fiction to surrender. Asterisk Treasure Island remains a novel, and a very successful one. Its map need not become evidence to remain memorable. The old stories are most revealing when their inventions are placed beside what survives. The plank stands beside Admiralty procedure. The Universal Code stands beside ship-specific articles. The empty cove stands beside markets and freshwater trips. The treasure chest stands beside cloth, medicine, and rope. The fearless captain stands beside a sounding line, lowered one cautious measure at a time. No correction makes pirates ordinary in the sense of harmless. Their robberies displaced costs onto crews, passengers, captive Africans, merchants, and coastal communities. Some attacks carried severe abuse. Their companies used coercion and participated in slavery. Restraint in telling does not require softness in judgment, nor does judgment require flattening every participant. A coerced sailor was not identical to an organizer. A pardoned man was not necessarily a permanent outlaw. A merchant receiver did not stand on the boarding deck, but helped make boarding profitable. An imperial company injured by piracy could participate in its own systems of violence and extraction. Categories clarify history best when they remain precise. The precision rests in small acts. A clerk records an acquittal beside many convictions. A witness distinguishes the ship from an accompanying prize. A conservator notices cloth pressed into pewter. A historian declines to give Anne Bonny a convenient death date. An archaeologist notes that a bell gives a year, but not a ship's name. Testing one pirate claim often begins by asking what kind of source carried it. A court record was made to prosecute or judge. A governor's letter was made to report, persuade, excuse, or request help. A newspaper sold recent information. A merchant account tracked property. A chronicle arranged events for its own readers. A later novel made no promise to serve an admiralty commission at all. Date alone does not make one source transparent. A witness close to an event can still lie, misremember, or see only one deck. An official can repeat rumor. A printer can alter testimony. A hostile captain can describe surrender as treachery, while an attacker describes it as lawful prize. Nearness increases opportunity to know. It does not remove motive. Distance has its own uses. A later historian can compare records that no participant possessed together. French depositions about La Concorde can be read beside North Carolina Archaeology. Moo Gull writing about the Gunge. I saw why can be placed beside English company correspondence. The later view loses immediacy and gains the chance to notice that one ocean held several political worlds. Translation requires another quiet decision. Exquemelin's account changed as it crossed languages and editions. Names from Persian, French, Dutch, Spanish, Malagasy, and other traditions entered English through varied spellings. A smooth modern sentence may conceal several editorial steps. The safest dramatic quotation is sometimes no quotation at all. Provenance matters for objects as much as pages. A canon raised from a recorded position within a documented wreck context carries different knowledge from a loose object said to come from a famous ship. Conservation can reveal manufacture and use, but removal without location destroys part of the evidence. Treasure seeking has often prized the object that shines and discarded the relationship that explains it. Silence must also be located. The absence of a treasure map in surviving Golden Age records does not prove that no pirate ever drew directions to hidden goods. It does show that routine map-making is unsupported, especially when weighed against practical sale and division. The absence of Bonny's later life does not prove an early death or long retirement. It leaves the later life open. Corroboration strengthens a claim when sources are genuinely independent. Two later books copying Johnson do not provide two witnesses. A modern flag illustration, repeated across many pages, may descend from one uncertain description. Repetition can measure popularity rather than truth. Tracking the line of copying returns a crowded legend to its single fragile root. Contradiction does not always mean that one whole source must be discarded. A trial pamphlet may preserve reliable dates and interested characterization. Johnson may copy genuine articles and invent a speech nearby. An institutional rec page may give careful artifact data, while a promotional summary reaches too eagerly for certainty. Claims are tested one at a time because sources are rarely all true or all false. Numbers deserve the same treatment. The count of captive Africans embarked on *La Concorde* comes from a specific archival reconstruction. The estimate of vessels taken by Roberts comes through period-based reporting and cannot be treated as a complete audited list. A large artifact total at Beaufort counts recovered pieces, not individual treasures. Scale means little until the thing being counted is clear. The method is slow, but slowness suits a history shaped by rapid theft. It restores ownership to a captured ship, passengers to a prize, labor to a haven, and uncertainty to a famous face. It permits an acquittal to remain beside a mass conviction, and a medicine chest to remain more revealing than a theatrical weapon. It also keeps the ordinary unnamed sailor within reach. A person may appear once as a witness, captive, crewman, or burial entry. Refusing to invent the missing childhood does not make that life unimportant. It recognizes that fame often follows the density of later storytelling rather than the weight of historical experience. Those acts leave less room for the grand final verdict that legend expects. The Golden Age was not a republic rising and falling under one flag. It was a period of overlapping wars, labor systems, trade routes, local governments, criminal companies, and expanding courts. Its beginning and ending remain approximate because the conditions emerged and receded unevenly. At the end, a harbor changed before the ocean did. Buyers grew cautious. Forts acquired crews. A pardon deadline passed. A former pirate gave information. A warship stayed longer. One company failed to find repairs. Another lost a prize, and another reached a court close enough to hear witnesses. The great haven became less useful through accumulated inconvenience. The same accumulation now builds the history. No single cannon proves a wreck. No single pamphlet proves a personality. No single code defines every crew. No single cache proves a map-making custom. Pieces become persuasive when their limits are kept beside them. Far from the marked island, a lead weight reaches the bottom of an inlet. Its line gives a depth, not a destiny. The result is called back, compared with memory and tide, and entered among the quiet judgments that keep a vessel moving. The channel ahead has no X, only enough water, a measured course, and the shore slowly receding behind it.